go
ECMs that are
backwards.
available.
Yeah.
I mean, if
seems
an ECM
insane.
is not available, then they should have
Well,
come
yeah.
up with a patch to fix that issue.
Yeah.
Right, it's going to go obsolete at some point.
Yeah. I haven't seen availability be an issue. We've always been able to get them, but I'm certain it's a lot more money than what Pedro's going to charge.
One
And
can only
anybody else
assume,
who
right?
wants to do it. Yeah. So
I mean, you certainly can't get cars right now. Our Subaru dealership, the lot is completely empty. Every car that shows up on a trailer is already sold.
it's already sold. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, they only have 2 or 3 new cars on the lot.
We're doing a little bit better than that, but maybe they're already all spoken for and they just haven't been picked up yet. I don't know. I just fix them. I try to.
Interesting. Oh, come on, computer, really?
I guess if we have a few minutes, I'll just go over that Subaru test I was doing. What I had found on the earlier ones, to clear that learned value for the misfire profile, you had to jumper the green connectors and then clear codes.
Oh, we talked about that. I remember.
Yeah,
now.
a vision. So I was curious to find out if doing that same procedure on the newer Subarus would clear the learned values. And what I found is it didn't clear the values at all.
Okay, you tried it.
Yeah, just putting the fuse in the underhood fuse panel
Right.
for programming mode. But
Yeah,
what it did allow me to do is clear permanent codes. So
right.
the vehicle,
It was you who had you were grappling with some phantom misfires, right?
correct.
Yeah, I remember. Yep.
Yeah, but I tested it on a 16 WRX that had a permanent misfire, or not permanent misfire, permanent code that had been fixed. And by inserting a fuse in there and then clearing codes, it erased permanent codes, which normally you can only do after a drive cycle that passes successfully.
Man, that's good to know. Cool.
See, that's the best part is you learn random stuff all the time you never expect.
I know. Well, that's what's so great about these events, you know.
The Subaru allow like a battery disconnect, discharge, cap discharge for any of that crap?
We do that for all kinds of things, but it doesn't work for those cam learning values that we were talking about. There's really been nothing to fix them.
And the misfire profile, it didn't
So
fix
nothing
that
in
either.
adaptations. Nothing in that. You can't relearn adaptations like we do on the Euros all the time. You know?
Yeah.
Which is crazy to me because it seems like something that you would want to have the functionality for.
I mean, pretty much every Euro car has a misfire readaptation. Why doesn't Subaru?
That's odd.
And there was nothing in the service information for troubleshooting, other than the basic checks for misfire. And this was a Subaru that had been to another shop for an engine because the original engine had low compression in a couple cylinders.
I remember.
And they put a used engine or a reman engine and had been fighting misfire codes ever since.
Wow. And
I took it apart and the crank sprocket had been glass beaded. So it looked terrible.
Oh no.
So I put a new one on and the false misfire counts remained. And it was only when the wasn't the VVT, but the variable intake runner system or the VTEC variable valve lift system would kick in on the Subaru that it would start counting them, which was kind of strange to me, but I don't know if that's when it started watching for misfires, but it would instantly start counting misfires on several cylinders as soon as that would happen. And we tried everything. I put a brand new factory crank sprocket on there and I posted it up on Facebook because I was like, okay, well, this thing's not misfiring.
I remember that.
I'm down to an ECM. And someone posted up a handwritten note that they had on their toolbox that says, key off, jumper green connector under dash, key on, clear codes, key off, unplug the connector. and that resets the learned values for that misfire. And sure enough, it took care of it. Didn't have any more issues after that.
That's awesome.
But the
it's like
assumptions
fact-
that as an engineer writing firmware, software, all this stuff, they have to not only make this thing work and pass emissions and perform a certain way, now they're asked to predict failures. And how is the car, or how are they going to handle the failures? So Subaru really hasn't had a lot of this over time and doesn't have engineers coming from other entities that would know about this. Why would they assume cam timing jumps and know that their programming would result in these learned values changing and not being able to be changed back? It's,
Well, I mean, they
in a
can
way,
change
it's
back,
asking
right?
a lot.
If you drive it enough. I mean, they will change
Nobody
back if you
who's
drive
driven it
enough.
long enough to do it.
Right.
Nobody
yeah, I mean,
has yet.
theoretically.
Somebody
it's
said
like the
they drove
Volkswagen
one for
stuff.
6 months and it never came back.
Yeah.
It's like the Volkswagen stuff. You have to clear the codes 3 times in a row because it sets ghost misfire codes when the vehicle's
Mhm.
not misfiring.
Triple tap.
So I don't know. I mean, I'm not trying to stick up for him either. It's just, I get it. You know, it's kind of like failure mode effects management, where the assumption is the car will behave a certain way if there's a certain type of failure. Yet you have Hyundai out there that if cam timing's off a tooth, it misfires on a single cylinder, which doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
But, you know, whoever wrote, or it's not one person, right? It's like not some dude or gal sitting there writing a firmware. It's a group.
Yeah.
And like they knew, like, oh, okay, well, let's put it on the dyno and let's just take the cam timing and jump it a 2, see what happens. They don't do that. They don't have enough time
Yeah, they
to
don't-
do that.
No, they don't do that, I don't think. Maybe we need some engineers in here so we can hear what they actually do, right? Just for
I
fun.
think they're just given problems and they solve them.
Yeah.
I mean,
And
Subaru
even at
has
that, oh, I'm sorry,
So,
I didn't mean
what?
to interrupt. But okay, so FCA back in the day, speed density, right? Almost across the board, everything's speed density. They come out with a new engine and they can't make this thing meet emissions to save their life. Engineers are working on it for months, can't get it to work. So what do? They call up essentially IBM. They get Watson on it. Watson, after what I think it was some absurd amount of time, short, figures it out. They needed AI to do it, or
Wow,
machine learning.
Funny. That's pretty
Right?
funny.
So it's building a car is not that easy. Fixing them sucks bad enough.
Yeah, right. This is true. Well, I mean, it's so we know they're imperfect systems, and I think that's one of the things that you get the most out of these discussions is exactly that. That it's an imperfect system, regardless of how much we try to account for that and whatnot. Interesting. Oh, I'm just talking to someone about a VW, so it's a funny situation. But we'll share about that later. Maybe he'll share about it. Sounds like it's an unusual.
Yeah,
Yeah, Rob hit you up too.
Dusty may be able to offer some insight into that.
Yeah, I was gonna say Dusty's getting hit up on it too, which is not a surprise here. So,
I mean,
Yeah,
he
it's-
called me and I said, I have no idea without VCDS or old coding data. I
so
said,
for the parts
time.
catalog, so I looked in PartsLink. It's according to PartsLink, it's the wrong ECU. So it's an ABS ECU, and he's got the wrong one. I can't pull it up on. So I've got 2 computers. I use my Mac for streaming
Yep.
stuff like this because my Mac runs really smooth, and I use my PC for other stuff, and that's got my gaming stuff and whatever. So I pulled it all up on my gaming PC, and it's literally on the same monitor. So I have to toggle the monitor input back and forth. But I'll share it later. But essentially, the catalog says the part number that was in the vehicle is fundamentally wrong. And
Well,
he
that
said he
makes-
ordered another one, and he got it from the junkyard and by VIN, and they sent him the wrong one again.
well,
So-
that may be explaining why he had coding when he originally put it in, saying it's not coded, or the original module wasn't coded because the part number may have been incorrect to start with.
That's what I'm thinking. Now, that doesn't explain why it started on fire, but
I mean, it's
mean,
that.
Even with some small hardware changes and stuff like that, man, you can do some SVM magic. I mean, if
Certainly possible. Yeah.
if it's in the ballpark, if that makes sense.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. If you, well, with factory software, there's a lot of stuff you might be able to do, and it maybe would work, but I don't think he's got Otis, which
No,
naturally,
he doesn't. He doesn't.
yeah,
have-
without Otis.
I
Well,
know.
and now he needs a Phoenix remote, right? Because then if he had a Phoenix remote, then the Phoenix remote, Matt could jump on there with his cab box, and he could remote in and set it up, right, Matt?
I can brick it.
Yeah, right.
Unfortunately-
Matt can brick it.
Unfortunately, doesn't even have VCS with the easy coding helper or whatever, which might have made life easier.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that does make a difference. Okay, so I'm just going to share just the initial startup here. Now, obviously, we're recording this session, so if you don't want to be recorded, time to leave. So I'm just going to
Initial
go
startup,
through.
you're doing a Mercedes?
Yeah, right. There you go. So I'm just going to go through the intro. I don't know. I think a lot of you were here for the first session, but we'll go through the basics just at the beginning again. So the basic goal we have for this whole group is just essentially sharing experience, right? So any level of sharing, whether you want to make a nice slideshow presentation or you want to just make a quick and dirty, hey, shoot from the hip, I'm going to talk it out, from memory, doesn't really matter. Anything from the beginning to the end of that is totally fine. The goal is really just to share knowledge and experiences and kind of discuss various interesting cases. And maybe if you've got one that's plaguing you right now, anything like that, that's the goal here, is to spend time talking about these things and helping each other out. So any level of tech is really welcome. So if you got people who are learning, who you think would benefit just from sitting and listening to this, I think certainly invite them. It's free, so there's really no reason not to come unless you don't have the time. So anyway, that's our goals. Again, all skill levels certainly encouraged. We're looking for anywhere from beginners all the way up to the pros, the top of the line guys, the top 5%. We're also going to we've got some sponsors here, Auto Rescue Tools and Equipment. We got TopDon and we got Curion, which makes the N2 Neuron wireless DVOM. So for the wireless DVOM, we are actually doing a drawing after this session. If everybody remembers to send me their email address through Facebook Messenger. Last time, I think we had 50 attendees and only 2 people sent me their email addresses. So they're not going to get entered in the drawing, but send me your email address through Facebook Messenger and I'll get you added to the drawing. And then at the end of this session, I'll do the drawing. I'll give it a couple of days just to make sure everyone gets me their email. And then if you win it, then I will notify you and you will win a N2 Neuron. So pretty cool. Also got discount codes I'll share at the end. I'm going to skip. Oh, how many of you were here for the first session and went through the Dodge case study I did last time? Most of you? So Mike was here. You can type in the chat too, for sure. Because I won't go through that one otherwise. But actually what I'm going to do is I'm going to exit presenting and I'm going to let the other people present first, because I have 3 cases I can share if we run short on content, basically. So we'll go ahead and we'll let Leo present. So Leo, if you want to just click, there's a square box down at the bottom with a up arrow in it that says present now. And then you should be able to click that and it'll allow you control. And I would say share a tab, which will just allow you to choose your presentation for the PowerPoint, basically.
Okay. So, all right, I don't have any. Let me try. Let me start with the whole screen. Can you see this?
Yep, we can see it. Yep, there you go. Perfect.
So this was about 1.5 years ago. This is a brand new car, 2,300 miles. Phantom misfires. Well, misfire codes. So just basic information, got some codes, 303, 301, 300. Basic freeze. There's obviously a lot more freeze frame data. I just threw that in there for the presentation. This was a while back. Now with an STI, anytime it's a WRX or an STI and there's anything funny going on, really one of the first things I like to do is run the CID and CVN through TechLine, because I can just call them and they'll run the numbers and tell me whether or not they've been messed with. Because if they have been messed with, then there's no need for me to pull my hair out, and these were good. So, dodged a curveball there. Sure enough, there were misfire counts, but you couldn't feel anything. The car was not misfiring, but it was counting misfires on all cylinders. So these graphs, these are laid out, 0 to 10. So where you can see those graphs hopping up is where cylinder, 1, 2, 3, 4, they're all jumping up, but you can't feel anything. You pretty much have to trust me on this, but there weren't any actual misfires. It just thinks that there are. So, being I like a Pico, I said, well, let me just grab a, crank sensor capture, because that's where misfires get inferred, right? So blue trace is this is a big wide swath capture right here. Big capture of the crank sensor. The red channel B is cylinder 1, and channel C is a thumb button that I just put in as a separate channel, so that whenever I had 2 computers running. I got my laptop with Pico sitting in the passenger seat. Right next to it is also the SSM. So I can see exactly when it's saying that it's seeing misfire. So I hit that green thumb button. So as a really crude guide there, I know that something in here the ECM doesn't like, right? Makes sense? So zooming in, it's normal when you're looking at these inductive captures, it's normal to see the amplitude get a little bit higher around the marker teeth. But within, in less than 180 or even 90 degrees of travel, it's rare to see a change in amplitude like this. I thought, okay, what's going on there? Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
So what was nice is I didn't even have to go get it. I happened to have a capture from another car with the same engine. So here's 2 captures at 2,700 RPM. And you can see the difference in amplitude right here with the cursors, at the shortest peak and the highest peak. We've got like an amplitude change of 2.7 volts. That's on the problem car. Look at this known good car. Less than a volt. So these are the same engines, identical crank sensors, identical reluctors, identical speeds. So then it begs the question, well, now what could cause that? Well, distance of the reluctor to the sensor. Pull the sensor out and there's oil on it. Remember, this thing's only got 2,000 miles on it and there's already oil on this sensor. So what's up with that? Go a little deeper. Grab the crankshaft and raise it up and down, and there's 10,000ths of an inch of radial play. So forget it, man. This thing's done. At that point, it was someone else's decision as to what to do, whether they were going to have me completely tear it apart and rebuild it. But what they ended up doing was just having me put a short block in it. So that was kind of just short, sweet, and fun. And then
Crazy for 2,000 miles, though, man. Holy moly.
I know. And then it turned out that there was a batch of STI engines that were doing that, which they told me about afterwards.
Of course. What hadn't made a bulletin status yet, I'm sure, right?
No, I'm not sure it ever did.
So
here's
even better.
Yeah. So this was I don't know, a year and a half later. Similar issue. I'm kind of going with the theme tonight. So this is actually an older car, but a newer design engine. That STI, even though it's a 2020, it still uses the old EJ engine, the belt-driven platform. This 2016 Impreza has the newer 4-cylinder chain-driven engine. So a fellow tech put clutch in it, just a routine clutch job. The clutch was done. I never took a picture of the clutch because I didn't know this was going to be a case study. I do remember seeing it. It looked something like this. The thing had blown to smithereens. So this tech, did the job, got it done. Only problem was, then we were getting misfire codes. And what was interesting was this was just like that STI. There weren't any misfires. Here's roughness counts. That top graph is engine RPM. And then below it, you got cylinder 1, cylinder 2, cylinder 3, cylinder 4. So that's just a graph representation of the roughness counts. This is just kind of running it down the road a little bit. And again, it's not misfiring, but the ECM sure thinks it is. So this is going to continue to be a problem. Well, again, misfire data all comes from the crank sensor, right? Anyway, this is a funny case study because I'm an idiot on this one. I'll just throw that one out there. That first case study was like, oh, look at this. This came out really cool. Well, this one, I wasted a lot of time. So this is for your entertainment. So, all right, on these ones, the crank sensor is at the back, sandwiched between the flywheel and the crank, which is right where the tech was who did the clutch, because he did the flywheel also. So he's got the flywheel off. I haven't seen it myself, but I've heard a number of times of guys not aligning that reluctor to the crankshaft and then just hammering the flywheel back on. If that's what happened, there'd probably be worse symptoms than phantom misfires, but who knows? He was just here. Why not take a look? The crank sensor comes right out, pulled it out, nothing there. We didn't bang on it. We looked at the teeth of the reluctor. They were fine. So, you know, rather than obviously pull everything apart, the scope capture of the crank and a couple of cams. The ECM's right behind the glove box. In fact, you don't even have to take anything apart to get to it. You can just lay under there and just pin the connector. So here's the vehicle in question, and just kind of let me just get an idea here. You know, the two cursors in the middle, I just kind of arbitrarily picked this one wave of the crank sensor and then this edge of the square wave of the cam sensor and just got a reference. That's the other difference with these two engines, is that this engine uses a Hall effect for the crank, obviously, and that other one was inductive. So the nice thing about being at a Subaru dealer is that there's always other Subarus laying around. So I get a known good vehicle. And I mean, as you can see, the difference here, 2.067 versus 2.028. I mean, these are the same. He didn't put the reluctor. I already know this. So, but I'm getting tunnel vision. I'm thinking back about that STI that I had with the crankshaft lay. So I start thinking, well, now is the same thing happening again? Of course, why would it only manifest in phantom misfires when a clutch was put in? Who knows? But I measured it anyway. 6 thousandths of play at the crank, and the service information really only allows for 1,000th. So I thought maybe I was onto something. But at any rate, at this point, Techline was involved because there was apparently a batch of bad clutch parts that were out of balance, or they were wrong or something. And they said, you got to get those things out of there. So while I was at it, I was able to see what they were concerned about before. I forgot to mention that Techline said, hey, you got to take it all apart to make sure he didn't put that reluctor in wrong. And I said, well, I got a scope capture that shows that it's perfect. And that didn't really translate over the phone, but whatever with that. So here they wanted the clutch parts replaced anyway. So I was able to go in and see, yep, everything's in place. Measured the play of the crankshaft back there, about 3 thousandths. Service information says that's bad, but it still doesn't add up. I also went to another engine and got the same amount of play. But then because of the concern about the clutch parts, so you can see how the waters are muddy here between my own, Matt, this is like what you and Paul Danner were just talking about, getting in love with the diagnostic process. Here I am going down all these crazy diagnostic rabbit holes. They wanted all new clutch parts put in. So I put them in because I had the old ones out anyway. Like, you know, at this point, why take the risk? When I put it all back together, it's still counting misfires. And yet there's no real misfires. These are just, they're phantom. They're totally phantom. So, all right, I'm totally out of ideas. This is probably what I should have done. A parts replacer would have done this first and they would have won because the crank sensor fixed it. See, my thing is I looked at it physically. It looked okay. The capture looked pretty damn similar to a known good car. Even when I zoomed in, I wasn't seeing any weird waveforms, so I never changed the crank sensor. But when I finally did it, it worked, lo and behold. So then I went back and looked at the two captures. And when you look at the reference line on the original one, it's got all that noise there, which I had noticed earlier. And friends were saying, well, you need to ground your scope better, blah, 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 which I did, and it never changed it. Anyway, point of the story is that fixed it. So, and that's where it was until I went to Vision. Now there's a second half to this. This car was fixed and long gone. I took Adam Robertson's Pico 6, Pico 7 set. And at the end of class, it was actually done. He said, hey, you guys want to stay for 10 more minutes? I got something really cool to show you. And that's when I learned about deep measure, which a lot of you guys probably already know. But I had these captures in my laptop after I learned about deep measure from Adam. I literally went back up to my hotel room, pulled up this capture, applied deep measure to it. So here's the crank sensor from the car, right? This is a big, wide capture. I mean, that's 4 seconds of crank data all squished together. Apply deep measure to it. See, oh, and back to what I was saying before is that I did this early on, just zoomed in randomly to areas of the waveform, just trying to look for something funny. You know, having tunnel vision back to that STI, how easy it was to see an anomaly. This being a Hall effect, I was striking out. We'll put deep measure on it. And for anybody who hasn't played with this yet, you put deep measure on a capture and it analyzes every feature of every part of the entire capture, every wave, every up, every down, every plateau, every valley, everything, and lays it out in a spreadsheet. So see down here, look over here, the size of this elevator bar, how tiny it is. Gives you an idea of how long this list is. It's gigantic. So then if you just go to the top of the table and just click on any of these categories, in this case, I clicked on frequency. If you scroll down this list, and I don't have an example here in the PowerPoint, but all these frequencies are 1.8 something. But when you click on a column, any column, it'll rearrange it. So it'll throw your anomalies to the top or the bottom of the list. So if you look right here, everything's 1.8, blah, 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 blah. But then right at the top of the list, there's all these bigger numbers with a 22 kilohertz. And then if you click on that cell, it'll bring you right to that section of the capture. Click on the next cell. So here, this car was long gone. I knew that I had fixed it and I thought I was onto something, but I had never actually seen the bullet, until now. And this is in my hotel room of vision. I went, whoa, this is so cool. And you can get rid of all the cross hatching. And I mean, look at that. This waveform was full of, these little guys that I could never see when I was just kind of doing it haphazardly.
Would have taken you years to go through the whole waveform, right?
Yeah, no, deep measure just does it for you. There were a few of them. I mean, look, these, there's the top of the list. If you can see the cross hatching, how the cross hatching is kind of going to the right, but then when there's a change, it zooms to the left. If you look right in here, there's a tight little spot. I could zoom in if I was in Pico, but I'm not in Pico right now. So that's that 22K frequency. That's the only time in this whole capture where the frequency was so rapid that you got this big number. Anyway, pretty neat.
So where did you go to get into that?
Into deep measure?
Yeah.
I think, and I'm not in Pico, so I can't click on this. Sorry about that.
Oh,
If
yeah.
you're in measurements or tools, you just click on it, go deep measure, and you just tell it to go. Man,
That is so cool.
It's so cool, man. It's just, training events, networking, these sorts of stuff like this happens. And this was even after the fact, So I had actually sent that case study to Subaru. And then I got so excited about this, I sent them again and I messaged them, at the department that takes these case studies. I said, hey, I got to send you part 2 of this because that wasn't enough. And so then I was able to give them both.
I heard back from them.
Yeah.
Did they like it?
Yeah, no, absolutely. No, well, every month they actually pick a winner. And so
they do?
Yeah. That's
pretty
actually
cool.
what inspired me. I'm trying to get back. Did I stop sharing?
Yeah, you're good. You stop sharing. Yep.
Yeah.
I'm curious.
Yeah.
I'm
They
curious
call it-
where it is on 7 because I know I found deep measure on 6, but I haven't used it yet on 7.
According to Adam at Vision, he said it's not in 7 yet.
Are you serious? Oh, no wonder I
There's a
haven't
lot of-
found it.
There's a lot of stuff not in 7 yet, but
God damn it.
I thought you might have been able to find it with like falling edge count or rising edge count, but it wouldn't have been as slick as that.
It,
Deep measure was a really slick way to do that, but rising edge count or falling edge count sometimes can help you with that. But you would have ended up scrolling
A lot.
well, that or you'd have got tricky with maybe like a pulse width trigger or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
And
like I
watching.
said, yeah, he was almost done with class. He said, hey, you guys want to spend a few more minutes? And he showed pretty much what I just showed. He had a big, giant, thick swath of a crank sensor from a Chrysler. He applied beat measure, boom, it went right to the thing. And I went, oh, ran up. I knew I had these captures and I put it on and just boom, just as easy as I just showed you. It just went right to him. I went, oh
You
my
tell
God.
them like, no, you lead with that. You don't. That's not your end.
Hey, Leo, whose class was that?
The class I'm talking about?
Yeah, Vision, yeah.
Yeah, it was Adam Robertson, Pico 6 to Pico 7. He taught it in the hotel next door, which was actually the hotel I was staying.
Oh, okay. I didn't, missed that one.
His evap class is badass.
I've heard good things. I haven't taken any of his classes, but I've heard good things.
Yeah, his Asian, like it focuses on Toyota, Nissan, and Honda. His evap class is badass. It was pretty good.
Nice.
Did you not have seen that on a math channel or something like that? Would that not have spiked and shown us multiple
That probably,
times?
yeah, that probably would have worked also. I mean, I played with math channels a little bit, and you know, when there's when you have a crankshaft slowing down or speeding up when you have the misfire, you'll see that in the crank sensor. But in this case, it's not a case of the crankshaft actually slowing down from a misfire. It's such a tiny moment of one little glitchy wave that it might not even show up. I don't know. I mean, I have the captures and I could try it.
That's the thing. It's just so intermittent. It's not like, you know, because I've only played around with the math channel and I was looking for ghost misfires on a Volkswagen.
Right.
And, you know, they weren't actually there. And then it was the triple tap.
Yeah.
I fixed that.
Oh yeah. Don't you love those cars?
Math channels are graphing frequency. Maybe it'd have caught the spike. Maybe.
Yeah, I've had good luck with some of the math channel stuff at finding anomalies for sure. I just kind of screw around with it and see if I like, especially after I find the fault, then I'll screw around with the math channels to say, hey, would this have helped me find it easier or no? You know, and that's I think that's the one thing about the scope is if you ever do have time to screw around with it additionally like that, boy, oh boy, is it worth your time to screw around with it. You know, if you got time to press some extra buttons or like, you know, Leo did, save the capture and then go back and screw around with it later, you can find some additional stuff with your scope that you had no idea you had access to, or you pick out a fault faster and then you learn something from it. And I mean, I would imagine that's how a lot of guys who have become really good at this stuff, that's how they discovered it. Or they're lucky and they went to a class and someone shared something really good like that, you know? So
case in point, man,
crap.
Changed my life.
Leo saved our butt a long time ago. Not even
I mean,
scope stuff.
that was good find though. That was a good find.
So I think Jeremy has something he wants to share now. Jeremy, is that correct?
Yeah, I can.
I mean, if you want to save it to next time, that's cool too.
I'm a little intimidated, okay, because these guys are talking about things that make my head spin right now. So, but yeah, I can. Let's see. Screen 1, screen 2. Which one do I want to select here? The whole screen?
I just did tabs. So like if you got a tab open or whatever, it'll let you select just one specific application. That's what I usually do. Seems to work good that way.
Okay, so let's do this.
Also won't bog down the computer so much.
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure. Well, we're just going to roll with this and see what happens.
Hit the button, see what happens. There you go. That's working. I can see.
Yeah, buddy.
All right, but that isn't showing the actual presentation.
So now
Okay.
I think if you hit slideshow, it should work.
I don't know how this works. I've never done a slideshow.
There you
we
go.
go.
Yeah, that on the
Fantastic.
money.
So this is
Yeah.
my first PowerPoint presentation. I don't have a webcam, believe it or not. So I do, but I don't know how to use it. But something I've run into, the first one I ran into was about 3 years ago. Totally lost on that one. The second one I ran into, I had an aha moment, had a theory going. The third one I ran into, definitely figured it out much quicker. But the 3.6 liter Pentastar, we're all familiar with the intermittent cam crank codes on these. And typically they're, the 369, 344, 394, 349 code. Typically we go in, first thing we do is we start scoping whatever cam is setting the code versus the opposite cam on the other bank, and we look through it and we try to figure out, is that cam actually missing a signal or not? And 99% of the time we can find a pattern failure, and most of the time it ends up being a bad reluctor on the camshaft. It gets a new camshaft, everybody's happy. Everybody's run into that. I've had, like I said, the first one I ran into was about 3 years ago, setting, I think it was intake cam 1 on this particular one. The guy had already replaced the camshaft, the cam sensors, the wiring, the PCM, the actuators, phasers, oil control, but he replaced everything. It's still setting this code. Okay.
All new.
So, everything's new. So we started over. Scope cam and crank, and he was using a snap-on at the time. It's fine. Should be able to find a fault. This code was only setting, and all these codes are only setting under a moderate to hard acceleration. Will not set in the shop, will not set at idle, will not set if the car is driven like grandma going to church on Sunday. Okay, so that was kind of my first clue. I got some tunnel vision. I should have paid more attention to that. I didn't. So we went ahead, we scoped cam and crank, and nothing is showing up. And he's telling me this code is setting. And that one, the guy actually worked at a shop I used to work at, and one of the techs I used to work with works for that same company. I talked to him a couple years later, and they ended up putting an engine in that one, and that solved it. So that got me thinking. Okay.
Right.
So how can we put an engine in this and get the code to go away? Okay, I'll skip this second one. That's just a fancy one showing cam and crank. So this is what we normally see, right? We scope both the intake cams, both the exhaust cams, and we're looking for any anomalies. So we're taking a known good and we're looking for the cam that's setting the code to not show the appropriate pattern. Every time these patterns look correct. There's nothing showing up. And I'm telling them, as soon as you see this check engine light, stop your recording, save the file, send it to me. We'll look at it. We're looking at it. Nothing is happening. Okay. So fast forward to the second one. I had an aha moment. So we scoped our cams, and that one was bank 1 intake. I think it's in the next slide. So we scoped the cams. There's nothing wrong with the signals. So I told him, I said, we're going to get all 4 of our intake cam crank, or all 4 of our cam crank differences, all 4 of our cam actuals, all 4 of our cam desireds. We're going to take this out for a drive, and as soon as this code sets, stop and send me that information. So he sends it to me, and this is what I get. So I'm looking through this data, and I know it's intake cam 2 that has the problem. So I'm looking at intake cam 1, and I'm looking at the cam crank difference, and it's like, yeah, it looks pretty normal. I look at intake cam actual and desired, yeah, it looks pretty normal. I go to intake cam 2, and I see something wrong. So on the very tail end of intake cam 2, right here, the cam should have returned to its home position. And we can see that because the PCM is commanding it back to its home position right here. Same thing with bank 1. It commanded it back to its home position. Bank 1 went back to its home position. Bank 2 did not. It went back to its full advanced position, right? So at that point, it's an aha moment. Okay, now I get it. The cam doesn't go where it's supposed to. The PCM is expecting to see a cam signal where it is supposed to be in its home position. It doesn't see that signal. Now it flags an intermittent cam code. Okay, so at that point, we run through all the possibilities, and I think that one actually got a phaser and oil control valve that took care of it. So the third one comes along. Same thing. We scope cam and crank, can't find anything. tell them, okay, get me the data pits. And I should have moved to the next slide here. That would have made it a lot easier. So the next slide makes it a lot easier. So you can see intake cam 1 went back to its home position. It was commanded to go to its home position. Intake cam 2, where to go? Cam crank difference did not go back to its home position. It was commanded to go back, and the code set. Okay. So this third one comes along, and same thing. Same scenario. It only sets high RPMs. You're accelerating onto the on-ramp on the freeway. Code sets. Cam and crank perfect. No dropouts. No nothing. I haven't scoped this data. So this one actually ended up being the exhaust cam, and it was exhaust cam 1, and you can see it right here. So it was commanded to retard, and then it was told to go back to its home position. It's stuck at about minus 40 degrees. And if we look at exhaust cam 2, same thing. It was commanded, cam crank difference, it was commanded to retard. We can see it was commanded to retard. It was told to go home. It went home just fine, no problems. So that one, he ended up replacing the camshaft, and that took care of the issue. So the theory is that some oiling event in these heads or in the block is either restricting oil flow out of these phasers or restricting oil flow into these phasers, and these phasers cannot work. They cannot go back to wherever they're supposed to go. And like I said, if the PCM is expecting to see a signal, it doesn't see a signal. Rather than flag a cam crank difference code, it just says, I didn't see a signal, sensor must be flaking out. So
interesting.
That's kind of it. That was just kind of quick. I wasn't really
1999 oil changes. Yeah.
I wasn't super prepared to do this tonight. I threw this together literally at 7:15. So I just wanted to throw that out there. If you run into one of these that are set to intermittent cam codes, go into your data, look for these data PIDs, and see if those cams are actually returning home when they're supposed to, and whichever one isn't, the likely issue is there's an oiling issue. And as far as specifically what's causing it, like I said, one got an engine, one got a phaser, one got a camshaft.
That's a good question. Someone asking about if an oil cooler failure could have starved the top end long enough to cause damage, which makes a lot of sense on a 3.6 because those do leak a lot.
And I think honestly, anytime we're pulling valve covers on a 3.6, the usual conversation that I have is, if we pull that valve cover and there is neglect in that engine, we're stopping. I don't care if we're replacing rockers. I don't care if we're replacing the cam for a bad reluctor. I don't care if we're doing a timing job. If there's debris in there from lack of maintenance, it's getting an engine. Otherwise, you're opening up a can of worms.
Well, and I mean, that's a great point, and I see that happen a lot with shops that kind of don't go full measure on stuff where they should. So I was actually talking to a friend of mine who used to work for Garage Gurus with me, and he switched over to a Euro shop in Florida, and so they fired the previous tech that he replaced, and I'm definitely finding out why, because he's sharing some of the stories. So he tells me about a 3-liter Porsche diesel, which is essentially just another Volkswagen diesel. It's, same thing, 3-liter diesel on the Q7s and all the other stuff. Dusty knows them very well, I'm sure. So he gets one of these in, comes in, and the work order says that he's supposed to replace a fuel injector for a crank no start. So he's like, yeah, that sounds like BS. So his policy is, I re-diagnose anything before I touch it. I'm not just doing whatever the work order says. So he dives in and he pulls the high pressure pump solenoid and finds metal, of course, because the previous tech did not do that. So he goes, nope, needs an entire fuel system. I'm not putting any injectors in this thing. It needs a whole fuel system. And so anyway, Apparently, the shop did not have the proper conversation with the customer in the first place, and they trusted their previous tech who gave them bad information. And of course, the customer said, no, I want you to put all 6 injectors in it that you recommended before anyway. So they put all 6 injectors in it anyway. And my friend said, I'm not okay with this. This is the wrong decision. This is not going to end well. And naturally, the car came back. And yeah, I was setting a ton of faults. And in addition to setting a ton of faults, the injectors were sticking open intermittently and causing big clouds of white smoke from excess fuel. And yeah, he does need a job, right? He needs a different job. But anyway, this is actually, you guys will laugh. This is the shop in Florida that's hosting the iScan training with Craig Shippey coming up in a week or two. So I laughed at that. So that's the shop, and boy, oh boy, holy cow. So anyway, they it's sticking the injectors open, creating white smoke. So the front shop guy comes back and talks to my friend. He goes, what do we tell the customer? And he's like, the same thing you should have told him before. It needs a full fuel system. And if you drive this car and don't get rid of it immediately, you're likely going to get an injector hung open and you're going to blow up the engine. It's going to hydrolock. So anyway, they had that conversation, and yeah, metal in the tank's not going to fix itself. Exactly. Dusty said that. So yeah, that's 100% true. And so, I was suggesting to him what they should do is print out, Ford has a general service bulletin on common rail pump failures that covers this, that specifically outlines what is required for replacement if you find any metal in the fuel system. And I said, hey, I understand you guys are a Euro shop, but I would print that bulletin out and hang that thing up on the wall, because every customer needs to understand, if you find metal in the fuel system on any common rail diesel, full system replacement, we're done. And if the customer says no, then you tell the customer to take the car somewhere else. I literally took calls like this on a daily basis on the Bosch hotline, where shops would beg me and say, please tell me I can just do an injector and a common rail pump. And I'm like, no, that's not how this works. I'm sorry you have to give a customer a horrible piece of news, but I mean, it's just what has to happen, right? Yeah, Chad said, the kit comes with everything in one box from Ford. And, I'm sure if you talk to many of the other dealers with any common rail systems, they probably have a kit built out. Maybe not, like just, from the factory, but they probably created a can job in their parts system and whatnot. So, but I look at that, that's just a great example where it really makes a big difference. And, the communication piece is so crucial. And, looking at this, these Chryslers with this issue with the cam sensors, it's interesting to me that it was only doing that under those situations. Cause I had a Volkswagen actually that was doing something similar. It would set a camshaft sensor code, and I believe it was position, but it was on an old school 8-valve timing belt, no variable valve timing or variable valve lift engine, and it would only set under medium to hard acceleration. I actually have a video of the cam sensor, and I'll put it, yeah, basically like it's actually a CBPA because it's a 2015, but it was doing it. My friend was like, he looking at the car, and he's like, he had never seen any of them do this before, and he was really confused. So we put the scope on it, and we took it out for a drive, and you could see the sensor drop out, but only under heavy load. And we checked the camshaft for run out and everything, and there was nothing going on. There was literally just the sensor. I don't know if it's because of engine temperature under heavier loads or what the actual cause was, why the sensor would drop out only under medium or heavy loads, but that's what it would do. Put a sensor in it, completely fixed. But really, really, someone asking 2015 is old school. Yeah, the 2-point slow got recycled from 2011 to 2015. They basically brought back the old 8-valve motor from the early 2000 to 2004 era. And just super interesting. So hearing another story about a camshaft position sensor fault that was mechanical in nature instead of electrical in nature, but under similar driving conditions, was really fascinating. Now, 2 different systems, obviously, one that has VVT and the other one does not, but still interesting to see that the fault is manifesting in a similar way, and yet 2 completely different root causes. So I always enjoy seeing that kind of stuff.
So don't mean to interrupt, but to elaborate on that, these cam sensors setting codes, especially the intermittent codes, I found a lot of them will flake out cranking, but will be just fine when running.
Oh, that's interesting.
you're cranking the engine over. It's and usually it's on bank 2 because the engine really doesn't care. The PCM doesn't care about bank 2 when it's starting. It only cares about bank 1. So typically this happens on bank 2, and you'll scope cam sensors on bank 2 running. They're perfectly fine. You scope it cranking, and you will see that dropout every 360 degrees, indicating a bad reluctor.
That's really interesting. And I mean, that's one of the reasons why I like doing this whole meeting and talking in a roundtable like this, because you hear about these really fascinating things, and it just allows you to remember to entertain more possibilities and realize that there's more branches on that tree of possibilities than sometimes we think about out of the gate. So, I mean, really, really interesting. So does anyone else have one, or otherwise I can jump in and do the ones that I have? No one? Bueller?
I'll give you another one.
You do?
Yeah. Just
Good.
I'll throw it out there as long as we're talking about cams and stuff and phasing. I had a 3.6 liter, and it was setting a slow response code. And if I remember, it was on a Jeep Wrangler, and it was bank 1 intake or exhaust. I don't remember which one. Setting slow response code, and ran through the normal things. We did the actuator test, make sure the actuators are working. We actually supplied our own power and ground, listened for the engine to stumble and die and whatnot. Everything is perfect, right? Well, this phase code, or the slow response code, would only set, and if I remember right, it was a male vehicle tool. And Pentastar engines in male vehicles, they have the worst issues with every type of timing issue, every type of cam issue you could think of. It's going to show up on a male vehicle, right? It's right-hand drive male vehicle. Okay, so we finally figured out that the code only sets when the engine is smoking hot, right? It has to be running for like 2 to 3 hours. You have to be driving it down the freeway at 70 miles an hour in third gear with 8,000 RPM, and then this code will set. So the guy I was talking to, he was genius. He brings it back. The code is setting. It's setting consistently. He clears it out. He takes it for a drive. It's setting again. He brings it back to the shop. He pulls the cam actuator off, and he sticks one of those red plastic cups that you get from a salvaged engine. They cover up ports and stuff. He sticks one of those red plastic cups in the hole where the actuator goes. He takes a pick and he pushes on the cam phaser, on the oil control valve, the little spool valve, and that engine does nothing. It doesn't stumble. It doesn't change. It doesn't do nothing. And it's like, holy crap, that's genius. I mean, I would never have thought of that, because he's like, I'm putting power and ground to it. Nothing's happening. Like, what do you mean nothing's happened? He's checking the actuator, the pinto's coming out of the actuator. What do you mean nothing's happened? So he does that, and this cam isn't moving. The engine isn't stumbling. Nothing's happening. And that one ended up, if I remember right, that one ended up getting a phaser and oil control valve, problem solved. But that one was really peculiar and genius on his part to actually do that, mechanically check it. And if you're mechanically pushing on that and nothing's happened, something is wrong.
I actually heard stories of Subaru guys doing that on the chain driven engines. They'd pull the solenoid off the cover and literally just stick their thumb there. I mean, the hole is as big as a silver dollar when that solenoid's out. So you got the whole sprocket spin in there, but the little pintle in the middle, them just pushing on it to test them.
Crude but effective, right?
Yeah.
I don't like to stick my fingers in engines like that. I'm a little nervous about that, but outside of that, sticking other objects in there, sure, that's fine. I'm not worried about that. All right, so the cases that I have, I guess I'll go with it. I'll start with the Dodge anyway. Just I did it last time, but we'll blow through it quick just because. Well, I guess why not, right? Screw it. So 3.7 Dakota, rough running, lack of power. Shop had put it. They had said there was a single cylinder misfire fault, which they say was resolved by installing an ignition coil. So they're like, okay. Now they're driving it around. They're saying, boy, it still feels like it's misfiring really bad, but there's no fault codes triggering. So naturally, they call me and they're like, we're confused. We don't know what's happening. And so I asked them, did you drive it multiple times and make sure the misfire monitor completes and all that song and dance? And they insisted they had. So I went out, and I never believe anything anyone tells me. And I'm sure my friends from Identifix can agree that that is always a good policy, especially when you're talking to someone else and checking on a diagnosis. So naturally, my first instinct is let's scan it and make sure they're not full of crap, right? Well, they were telling the truth. There was no lies in their statement this time. So sure enough, determined that no fault codes triggered of any kind related to misfires or otherwise, which was a little surprising just on a vehicle this old. So I always like to build stuff like this for myself, just to help myself wrap my head around all of the different possibilities related to a root cause of a given problem. And I try to do these kind of in a generic sense, make it expansive so that I can kind of think about it regardless of the vehicle application. I can always ask myself, okay, what branches apply to this vehicle, right? So I created something like this to try and help myself out, keep myself accountable, and make sure I'm actually checking off all the boxes when I'm actually doing a diagnosis. So I kind of went through the tree and looked at all the different possibilities there were. And I looked at some scan tool data because I always like to do, lots of instructors talk about this, and I think that's a good policy. Do what you can from the driver's seat right out of the gate. So I did. So I looked at the live data, and I found these data PIDs that I've never personally seen before. Jeremy's probably seen them before, but volumetric efficiency correction factors. So I was looking at these, and I noticed that there was a correction happening on actually both of the banks, which I thought was kind of interesting. And both of those banks showing some correction. And I said, well, that would make some sense if we've got some kind of a drivability issue. It's, idling kind of funky and it drives like crap. So it's definitely got something going on, and certainly the computer's recognizing it in some capacity here, but it's not flagging misfires. There were no counted misfires on anything. I could look at the live data, nothing, which I'm just kind of scratching my head going, okay, this is strange. Sounds like a Ford, right? So looking at the information and not seeing anything other than the volumetric efficiency stuff, so I'm kind of going, where should I go from here next? Well, what I like to generally do when I have a misfire is I will always go and check mechanical integrity of the motor first. That's just my default. Go look at a relative compression and an intake vacuum capture cranking. So that's what we've got here. Blue is the relative compression amperage, and the center there is basically you've got the intake vacuum capture. So I didn't see anything on either of these captures where I was like, okay, something looks jacked up here. I mean, sure, could you pick out something that's slightly different from another, but not really in general? No, it looks pretty normal. So I didn't see anything here that made me concerned. I did do a running compression test on a couple of cylinders, and it was within 10%, less than 10% of each other. So even for a very old vehicle with a lot of miles, mechanically, it was still fundamentally sound. And I was impressed by that because I actually thought I might find something there, because with a vehicle that old and whatnot, you can usually find more variance. But so nothing illuminating there. Had no reason to believe that it was a mechanical problem. So normally what I'd like to do is look at ignition after that. And in looking at ignition, I find that there's nothing I can look at with ignition easily, because this particular vehicle, which I'm sure if you've done a lot of Dodges, they love to drive both the coils and the injectors off the ASD relay, the power feed side. So naturally, I was like, well, God damn it, that's not going to be easy then. I'm literally going to have to go to every single coil one at a time and look at them, and I'm not doing that. That's not efficient. I will if I have to at some point in time, but I decided to change course right then and there, because I said, yeah, this is going to be highly inefficient if I literally have to go and clamp each one of these or put the ECOP probe on each one of these. So I said, all right, screw that. So I said, you know what, I'm going to go drive it again and make sure these guys are not total idiots and that the misfire monitor was actually completed. So I drove it, and yeah, it had been completed, and it still wasn't flagging misfires, and they weren't lying. So I proved them they were telling the truth, and they have lied to me a number of times before, I should say. So if I make fun of them a little bit, that's because they annoy me sometimes, as you can imagine. So after seeing that a coil had resolved one of the misfires, I did want to look at the rest of the coils just to investigate and see what was happening. But I decided before doing that, I would go ahead and go a little bit farther and figure out what cylinders are misfiring in reality. So I said, all right, look at the firing order. Let's take a look at that, verify which cylinder is which, so I know at least what I'm doing here before I do anything with the scope. So I verify firing order, then I set up my scope, and I do crank math channel. So it took some digging to figure out which cylinders were which, or not which cylinders were which, but how many teeth were on the crankshaft reluctor. But I figured that out, and I set it all up, and I was able to figure out that I had some misfires happening. There are, in fact, misfires, but the computer is apparently too old or too stupid to see them. So this was synchronizing on cylinder 3 for ignition, and then we had the so I used the ECOP to put it on the top of the coil, and then use the crank math channel and figure out which cylinder was misfiring. So it looked like 6 had a misfire. Then I looked again, so I ran a very long capture on this, and of course,
So
I was
how
using
are you
7.
doing that, Hakan? Like how are you making a math channel to see the misfire from that?
So the Pico software actually does it for you. So if you use the Pico software, you can basically click on, there's actually a button that says crank. And when you go, at least in 7, I forgot how you set it up in 6 because it's been so long since I've used it, but you go into 7 and it'll ask you how many teeth the crankshaft sensor, crankshaft reluctor has. So basically you fill in, you count the number of teeth in whatever picture of the crankshaft reluctor you find, and then you also have to account for the missing teeth. So basically, I figured out, I want to say, just shooting from my hip, I think it was 36. I can't remember for sure, but Jeremy might even know the answer to that. But anyway, I believe it was 36. So basically, you put in the crank math channel. It basically gives, it does the formula for you. You just type in the teeth number when you hit the crank button to set it up, and then it automatically processes the crank sensor according to whichever channel you say the crank sensor waveform is assigned to. And then it will automatically create that wavy line you see up at the top there that's deviating or dipping when we sync on 6.
So is that essentially almost like a frequency line? So every time you see
Yes.
it dip down, that means you're
Yes.
slowing down?
Yes. Yep. You're just basically
Okay.
seeing the speed of the engine is slowing down, which is, that's what the car is supposed to be using for determining misfires. And, when it's working normally, it should have flagged a misfire at a minimum on 6. So that was interesting. I thought that was kind of fascinating that they did that. Then I ran such a long capture. I looked at it multiple times, and I'm continuing to sync on 6 in this section of the waveform. But you notice I also found a weird deviation, and I was too lazy to put the cylinder numbering in on this capture. But I did notice there were other sections of the waveform when I did longer captures that looked like maybe on 4 was also misfiring. You'll just have to take my word for it. But I also thought 4 might be misfiring. So I told the shop, look, I think it's misfiring on both 4 and 6. I'm not 100% on that. Based on the information I have, it looks that way. I ran short on time, so I did not go to look at the coils directly on this. I did not put it on each of them. Now, I will point out, when we synced on 6, I guess I can go back. Whoops. We'll go back here. So look at
real
the...
quick, what was your what RPM were you capturing that at?
that was at idle.
That was at idle. Okay.
Yep, that was at idle. That's usually when I do it. So, I mean, assuming that it is, in fact, misfiring at idle. If it's not misfiring at idle, then, yeah, you'd have to put it through its paces to get it at the correct RPM range to try and get that data. So one thing I would like to point out here that I didn't really notice when I was looking at this vehicle, but I noticed after the fact, look at the amperage draw on the coil when I'm syncing on cylinder 3, which is a cylinder that I did not suspect any misfires on. We got about, what, like 4.5 amps on that coil. Now, let's look at the amperage we got on 6. We're like over 10 in multiple situations here. Which I don't like to stand on that 100% every time, but usually I kind of go by the 10% rule. If I see more than a 10% deviation on coil amperage, I tend to ask myself, is something else going on there? And in this particular case, obviously it was, but I didn't even notice that clue when I was looking at the vehicle. I got pretty fixated on the crankshaft speed and said, oh shit, we know there's something going on there, right? So I told the shop.
Suspect the lower amperage one, right?
What was that?
You would normally suspect the lower amperage coil then?
So I don't. So the way I look at it is I just look for deviation. I look at it is if I do all 6 coils and one of them is 10% higher or lower or more, that's the coil I go, something's messed up here. If I have 4 coils that are higher and 2 that are lower, I would probably be suspecting the lower coils. So for me, I don't try to look at it as there's like a golden rule in one direction or another. Typically speaking, I try to look at it more as comparatively. And, there's probably guys who are much more ignition gurus who could maybe tell you there is more of a law to that than I can. But I try to be really just practical about it and say, hey, if I see more than a 10% deviation between cylinders, across the board, then I start to scratch my head and go, something's different. So in this particular case, it turns out that the 2 coils that were having the issue, and I'm kind of spoiling it here, but it was coils, but it ended up being the 2 that had the much higher amperage draw. So I don't know why that is. Somebody could probably tell you the deeper level of analysis as to why that is. I would assume more resistance, or if not more resistance, but wear in the coils, I guess. So thinking mechanical resistance really more than anything. But the coils wear out and they have to work harder to try and create the spark, so they're going to draw more amperage. I guess that would be the theory that I would have, and someone smarter than me here could probably explain it better. But I did find out, I told the shop, I'm going to go with, you need to put at least a coil in 6, probably a coil in 4. Please put in OEM coils and then rock with that and see what you get. So they decided to put in all new coils. They actually replaced the other 5 coils, and it fixed the vehicle. Now, could it have also had a misfire on 1? When I looked at the waveform tracking, I said, I can't be 100% if it's 6 or 1. I think it's 6. I also did end up finding a cracked connector on coil 3. Now, that wasn't causing any misfire, but I did find that there was a cracked connector on 3, so I made them fix that too. But it ended up being that the coils were the root cause of the problem, and, it just kind of sucked that I had to alter my strategy with diagnosis since the ASD relay was in my way. And I have a Ford Edge that I'll do the next time we do this class, or this meeting next month. I'll do a Ford Edge where I did actually scope all of the coils simultaneously, and I can illustrate exactly what the question was about the amperage differences, because that one, I can't remember if they were higher or lower, but I had the before and after of all 6 coils, so you can actually see the difference between them, and it was a confirmed coil failure. So I'll show that one next time, and you guys can see that. But if anyone wants to jump in, so I kind of spoiled it here too, and I just jumped to the conclusion. But anyway, I did cross all my T's and dot all my I's. I did verify mechanical was good. It had good vacuum. Killing injectors didn't really make any difference to me that was noticeable. I did have fuel fouling on 1, 6, and 4. So 1, I think, was kind of, I want to say 1 was the one they put the coil in initially, if I remember correctly, which they did put in crappy aftermarket coils. So I also think they never took the spark plugs out and changed them, even though they should have. Didn't even change the one on cylinder 1. I don't even think they pulled the plug on 1 to check it for fuel fouling, but it was still fuel fouled when I looked at it, which could be just from crappy, it's still fuel fouled because it never got cleaned off or replaced. Or it could also be weak, crappy aftermarket coils. But nonetheless, vehicle ran much better after 6 coils, and it was good to go. So anyway, again, just pointing out the coil amperage draw was different on the suspect cylinders by more than 20%. So again, I try to just look at the differences, not necessarily absolute rules. So anyway, interesting case. I really enjoyed using the Pico for that stuff. Really kind of a cool opportunity to use the Crank Math channel. I haven't used it before this case. Talked to lots of guys who have and knew how valuable it was, and I was really excited to do that. So
I like how that Pico 7 prearranged math channel makes it so clean.
Oh yeah, it's so good. It's
only
amazing how well.
I know. I'm still kind of stuck in 6 because I like the zoom features so much better. And
yeah, I use both. I mean, I'm not going to lie. And frankly, I've had so many software issues with 7 on my Microsoft Surface. So recently I had an issue where I had a file that I captured on, I think it was actually on this Dakota. I had 6 files or some crap. Tried to open it up in the newest version of 7, the stable version, and it crashed it every single time. So then I tried opening the file in the beta 7, the newest beta 7, and it didn't crash. So I sent it to Ben Martins at Pico. I sent him all the files and I said, this one crashes the new 7 stable and it doesn't crash the beta 7. What the hell? So anyway, I gave it to him so he could test it and figure out what the hell's going on there. But anyway, the next case is actually the next 2 cases I have are both courtesy of Matt. Both of them happened at Matt's shop, and he allowed me to use these for this. Matt can jump in at any time he wants to clarify if I got some of the information incorrect on these or whatnot. But I thought both of these were kind of interesting. So
neither were my fault.
Yep, not my fault. Good call. So customer concern is a 2016 Focus 2-liter non-turbo. The concern was lack of power, especially up hills or under acceleration, check engine light flashing, and it was setting misfire codes, which we did prove out here in the pre-scan. So I'll always do a pre-scan and save it. So we saved it. It had misfires on 1 and 4 and a P0300 random misfire. And we actually have a video for this one, so it's going to be cool. So I still went to my plan of attack for this in my head and thought about, you know, what happened here. I know Matt went down this road with the vehicle, and he did actually find something really interesting on this car, and we have a video of it too, which is awesome. So he said there was normally, you know, on an underload situation where we have a vehicle that misfires under a load, medium or heavy load, we expect that that's going to be ignition related. At least my experience has usually been it's ignition related, especially on Fords. I don't know why, but Fords always just seem to have these really persistent, ridiculous failures like, hey, I drive up a hill and that's the only time this thing misfires, and, you know, whatever. Fords just seem to have these bizarre issues like this, but I guess that's not really any different from any other brand vehicle. They all have their weird quirks, right? So Matt did not find anything related to ignition problems. They did coil swapping, things like that. No differences, right? Nothing followed any mechanical parts on the ignition side, coil or plug. Relative compression, good. Mechanical compression, integrity, all good. So Matt decided to remove the injectors and do a bench test on them. So we'll see if it'll let me open this. I think I have to change tabs here so it'll let me share the video.
I didn't do it blindly. I looked at during the event. I did not like fuel trims, how they're adding, and maybe a crappy way to look at it. But if I figure each cylinder contributes roughly 25%, roughly, that if I have one that's not, maybe fuel trims will add roughly 25%. And that's what I had total. So short term and long term together, it was adding about 25%. It was probably like 23 or 22. That's why I went that, you know, I didn't just like throw up my hands and say, well, let's just test the injectors because I can.
No, I figured you had some more details that I didn't grab from you to add in, which is why I'm glad you're here. All right, so we're going to play the video here.
Direct injected fuel injectors off of a Ford Fusion with a very interesting misfire.
Can you guys hear the sound?
I'm going to test it at medium. And you're going to see that they all seem to fire. And then what is kind of cool is I'm going to change to high speed. So we're on high speed testing. And now, number 4 is not firing, and just listen to the difference. If you had headphones on, you could hear that number 4 was buzzing, but very lightly.
Yeah, I really wanted to share that video because I was like, man, that's a great video. Just an interesting illustration of what was going on. So let me go back to the presentation here.
Pretty neat.
Yeah, I thought it was awesome. So yeah, I had missed the detail on the fuel trim, which is, you know, why Matt had gone that direction. So I'll add that in for the future. So injectors got replaced. I can't remember if you guys did all of them or just one, Matt. Was it one or all?
All.
All. Okay.
For the price of the injectors.
Yeah, no, they're very economical. The solenoid style GDI injectors on Ford are what, like $20 or $30 or something ridiculous?
Yeah, like our cost is something like $35 on each for legit.
Yeah,
Motorcraft.
Yeah, for legit Ford ones. Yeah. So anyway, they replaced injectors, still flagging a misfire. So the flashing check engine light would still come on when going up hills, but the vehicle still started to feel like it felt smooth, right? It didn't seem like it was actually misfiring. I was like, okay, it feels normal now, but this car still thinks that it's flagging misfires. So we ran
that bring
on
fuel trims into shape?
What was that?
Did that bring the fuel trims back to where they should be?
Yes, they did look normal. So
Okay.
key on engine off and key on engine running self-test of the PCM did not flag any faults. So we actually ran that before we took it out for a test drive. So I always like to do that just with Ford because it's an easy thing to do, and you know, you might as well, right? So nothing flagged for any faults related to anything that would maybe make any sense. So then we drove it and we took it up the hill, and you could see that there was still flashing check engine light, but none of the data suggested the actual data for like fuel trim and whatever, everything looked normal at that point. And we're going, okay, so this is goofy that it's still doing this, right? Now, the only thing we did notice was on light acceleration, you could feel a little bit something that kind of felt like a misfire on initial acceleration. Now, some of you, if you're really Ford savvy, you probably already know what's going on with this vehicle, but nonetheless, so thinking about what we had on the table here for different things left over, kind of chopped off every branch on the tree. There really isn't anything that we had examined. Matt had crossed off all the boxes and kind of gone, well, there's really nothing left here. What the hell is going on? This doesn't really make any sense. So after driving it up the hill and getting it nice and hot, we decided to do a misfire monitor profile correction, and we cleared that out and reset that. Then we took it for a drive and it didn't flag misfires anymore. So the theory here in my mind is the vehicle must have been driven for quite a while with misfires before. That would just be my hypothesis. And it must have had a lot of learned data of bad data, basically, right? Lots of misfires that it had seen over time and had a bad learned adaptation, essentially. And I'd like to, I mean, my theory on this, and again, someone smarter can probably explain it better, but I know on Volkswagen, I took a class with John Thornton where he talked about, we're talking about fuel trims. On fuel trim data, he was saying that, you know, if a vehicle's been driven for a short period of time with a fault, you might not want to clear out adaptive values because the volume of information the ECM has accumulated over time, that running condition or poor running condition has only accounted for a very small portion of that learned adaptive value. If the vehicle was driven for an extended period of time with a fault, and there's any adaptive value related to that fault, then you should clear the adaptive values because it has so much learned bad data. And that was kind of the logic I was thinking about this one is maybe it misfired for a while and learned the bad data. Maybe not. I don't know. Maybe Ford's volume of data that it uses to form the profile is smaller. I guess, I'm not really sure what's going on behind the scenes there, but it cleared the check engine light. There were no more misfires flagging. It ran good. The only thing we did feel was we still felt that slight kind of feel like a misfire from an initial takeoff from an acceleration. So with my experience with Ford, I took hotline calls on Ford at Identifix, and if you guys have worked on these cars, you're aware that they have this DPS6 dual clutch. It's a dry clutch transmission. It's not like a Volkswagen where it has a liquid enveloped dual clutch situation. So these things have all sorts of weird problems with judder and shudder and chatter and whatever. And it's usually on an initial takeoff that you feel this. So the vehicle had 130,000 miles on it. And I kind of said, well, I'm thinking, maybe this is a clutch wear issue. We don't know if the vehicle had the recalls done to it or if it had warranty work done. They've got a warranty extension on these clutches, and the customers can often get them replaced for free, sometimes the entire transmission. The clutch motors can go bad on them. The TCM actually fails on them too. I want to say it's actually the clutch motor circuit that fails from excessive amperage draw, which I would suspect is probably in an effort to exert the amount of clamping force to get the clutch to actually grab. That's my suspicion, but I've never really done any research to verify that. But anyway, this is the only thing we really have left on the table at this point. So the vehicle ran great otherwise. This was the only thing, and I want to stress it was very, very slight. But at this point, this has got to be the only thing left on the table. And the customer, I don't believe, was actually complaining about this phenomenon at all. I don't think that was really ever on the table, but it's the CYA situation, right? So you want to have this conversation with the customer to let them know, hey, number one, check with Ford and see if you still have a warranty extension on this transmission. And number two, you might want to get it in there ASAP just because maybe you'll get a free transmission. But this thing actually looks a lot like a clutch from a manual transmission vehicle. And if you think about if you've driven one of those vehicles with a worn out clutch, what that kind of judder or slippage kind of feels like. Under the right conditions, you could potentially mistake that for a misfire, especially if it's a mechanically actuated clutch or electrically actuated clutch like these are. You know, the way that it's actuated could cause a more interesting symptom or sensation. So anyway, the injector, I thought it was a fascinating case just because rarely do you see an injector cause a middle or high load situation misfire like this. I mean, I haven't experienced it. I can't ever remember experiencing it, actually. I've never seen an injector stick then. I've seen injectors stick when they're at low load conditions where they'll drip, maybe when they're not supposed to be being actuated, or they'll maybe get stuck open. But I've never seen one where physically under a high or medium load, it just flat out does nothing. Now, I thought it was an interesting case. I've never really seen that before, but I also thought it was interesting to see that the misfire profile actually ended up being the fix for the check engine light and the flashing check engine light and whatever. And I thought that was interesting because I've had lots and lots of shops I've been to where they've fixed misfires and never reset that, and it hasn't been a problem. And then I run into this situation with Matt, and it was a problem. So, just a really fascinating phenomenon to see that it seems to matter so much in certain situations, and then in other situations it doesn't seem to make any difference at all. So again, the only thing I can chalk that up to is the stuff that John Thornton said about, maybe it depends on the volume of bad data the computer has learned over time. And that's the only thing I can really conclude from that situation. So anyway, really interesting. If you guys want, I can share these slides with you if you're not familiar with the DPS-6. There's a ton of TSBs on it. There's judder stuff that they talk about. There's extended warranty documents, clutch actuator, circuit failures. There's also some operational documents that they have online. So if you guys are interested in any of that stuff, I can send you that slide. So the other case study I have is, again, thanks to Matt. This was another really interesting one. And Matt can correct me if I'm wrong on the initial code that they dealt with. I believe it was a P2112, Matt. Does that sound right? Something about the throttle being stuck or binding. Does that sound right?
Yep.
Okay. So yeah, the initial code on this 05 Explorer, and it was a 4-liter, was a binding or stuck closed code. So that one was pretty cut and dry, right? So they replaced the throttle and that fixed that code. The throttle was moving normally again. And, a lot of these throttle bodies on any vehicle, they will bind or they will strip, just kind of depends. The codes were cleared. No codes came back right away. But I want to say, I can't remember if they released it or if they drove it some more and then it flagged faults. But either way, the question we had was, it did flag some other faults. And we have to ask ourselves, do we count this as a comeback or do we count this as a misdiagnosis? So
most electronic throttle controls, when they set codes like that, I unplug them and then open it up all the way and then take my hand out of there quick, just so it's not interfering. And I look for that thing to snap shut.
Yeah,
it should kind of snap shut and then go to the sprung open position. And this thing would periodically, I should have videoed it, but I'm an idiot. So periodically it would snap shut and stay shut.
Oh,
it wouldn't go back to the sprung position, and then I would go and I had to push really hard to get it to get back out to the sprung position. So it was binding. I thought it was a slam dunk. I thought, throttle body, game, set, match.
But I think, this case is a great example of, we can have a vehicle that can have two problems, and you don't even know, the customer only wants you to solve one problem, says, hey, my only concern is blank. I don't care if there's 17 other codes in the car, blah, blah, whatever. And you might, even the symptom. I mean, and that's the other thing. So that symptom that you're going to get from a 2112 and what Matt described with the throttle body could be the vehicle would go into limp mode and feel like it has no power, right? And the check engine light's going to come on, and the experience the customer is going to have is going to literally be, the vehicle has no power, right? That may be all they can articulate to you. They haven't scanned it. They have no idea what codes are in it. They don't understand any of that stuff. So we scanned it again, and this time we had a different code. We had a 2106. Now, we also have some other codes here that we can see in the list, and I want you to ask yourself, do you think any of those, just your gut reaction, do you think any of those codes are related to the throttle? Now, I would say most of us are probably, our gut reaction is probably not, right? And we can also see that the scan tool says there are some other systems that are, quote, okay. Now, thankfully, it's an older vehicle, so it doesn't really have a lot of modules. So we're going to go to the next page here. So I just wanted to point out, what does an ECM really do to monitor the functionality of a throttle body? It's kind of, this is out of a Bosch ECM logic related book. So they have some kind of cool stuff like this that I just kind of like to look at for conceptualization in my head about how the whole system works. So we're not going to, talk about every single thing, but there's a couple of different things. I like to look at, whenever we're doing diagnosis, I like to look at the master list of all codes related to a given component, just to kind of get a survey of what all can set related to this component, right? And I mean, we could have, sometimes there's only 1 or 2 codes for a given component. Sometimes there's like a big ass list like this. So in this case, we have a much longer list of faults. And so thinking about that, I go, well, the ECM has more capabilities to send different faults depending on what it's seeing. So I guess I'm a little less suspicious that this is a comeback, because shouldn't it be flagging something more related to like performance, or maybe something about, the throttle motor circuit is open, like if it's an inferior throttle body from, aftermarket or something like that. I would expect we'd have a different code than what we have right now. And again, it's a P2106, which is just forced limited power. So I like to look at that list just to kind of get an idea. So then I look a little bit more. I like to look at some of the information, just the other things that the ECM looks at when it tries to evaluate. So one thing you want to think about, like open loop, a lot of vehicles will run whenever you put the key in the ignition and turn it to the on position without starting the vehicle. A lot of the times you'll hear the throttle body move, and it's doing some of this testing, this initial testing of the throttle body to make sure it's working correctly before it turns on the engine. And when it starts initially in the vehicles in open loop, it may run some various tests to additional analysis on the throttle body to see if it's working correctly. So this is a really cool table on the left here I just wanted to share out of the book. So on the table, we can see, look at all of the different things that'll show up and whether or not the computer has the ability to recognize what's going on. So we see how increase in spring pretension and decrease in spring pretension, which is exactly what Matt is describing as the initial failure on the throttle body. We can see the little plus and the minus sign is whether or not that's a parameter that the computer should account for. So if it's got a 0, the odds are, the way I see this chart anyway, the odds are if I see a 0, it means the computer's probably not going to perceive that. If you got a plus or a minus, then the computer is likely going to notice that or flag that in some fashion. So you can see all of the different things that the computer has the ability to recognize. And when we look at that and we compare it to that giant fault code list that we had earlier that I showed you, it's interesting to make the connection and kind of see Ford actually programmed the logic into the PCM on this vehicle to account for a lot of these, right? So they actually have codes that should be accounting for many of these individual dimensions in fault logic. So that being said, I'm kind of questioning whether or not, I don't think this is a comeback. I really don't. And I mean, my default is always, whenever I'm with Matt, it's not a comeback, right? I give him the benefit of the doubt every time we're working together. So, so we're looking at this. This
advisor.
So we have, this is another thing that the computer can look at is motor torque. So this is, the computer's not literally going to look at it and go, oh man, the motor torque needs to be a perfect straight line. There's tolerances built into the software to account for, hey, the line that it reads based on the response of desired and actual throttle positions and stuff like that. That stuff is going to be, that's a moving target, right? The ECM or PCM knows that that's not going to be a rock solid, perfect straight line, because nothing is absolutely perfect, clean signal in most of the stuff you see. So the question I asked was, do we really suspect that there's a throttle body failure again here? Are we guessing? Are we thinking this is a defective part, or do we think there's something else going on? So we decided, let's look at the U codes. So thankfully, or should I say, unfortunately, Ford is lazy in 2005, and they have a bunch of really generic COM codes. So U1900, which was triggered in multiple modules, is extremely vague. It literally says, CAN communication bus fault. And I looked it up under multiple modules, and I want to say it was some variation of that description in every situation. It's not pointing the finger at anything specifically. It's not telling us what to look at. It's not saying, hey, I can't talk to this specific module, which we're spoiled, right? Because a lot of the newer cars now, if a module is down off the network, usually we're going to get a code in another module that will say, hey, I can't talk to this module, right? That did not happen in this case. So the pre-scan, one of the things that was interesting was, again, there was nothing flagging saying, hey, I can't talk to this specific module. But the pitfall you run into, and I actually ran into this exact situation the other day with a 2008 Chevy Aveo, where it was a similar situation to this, except I didn't even have any communication codes of any kind. There was a module that was not on the bus, that was supposed to be on the bus, that the vehicle was equipped with, and the scan tool, when you look at the bus topology, it just showed it as gray. And of course, when you see gray, you just go, oh, it's not equipped, right? And you might even just walk right past that and ignore it. But the ABS light was on this vehicle, so it does have ABS equipped, and the scan tool didn't flag anything saying ABS problem, right? So we look at the OEM wiring diagram. Yes, it has an ABS module. Why the hell don't we have any codes in the ABS module? Or why did it not even show up on the pre-scan? Well, it must be off the bus. So we're going to go at that, and we're going to take a look at the ABS module and see if we can solve that. So Matt and I looked at the wiring diagram, and we said, all right, well, let's look at what we got here. Anytime I look at modules, I always look at the fuses that supply the module. And typically speaking, if I see multiple fuses to a module, my assumption, and I could be wrong about this too, but my assumption is typically the low current fuse, like a 10 amp, a 5 amp, 15 amp, is going to be the module power up fuse. And the high current fuses are for the loads that are actuated or supplied directly by the module. So that would be, ABS pump. If it's using anything else, any other things that are connected to the ABS module that it supplies a load source or power to. That would be what I would suspect the large fuses are for. So we did some power checking, and we found that the 5 amp or the 10 amp fuse is physically dead. It has no power. Now, we didn't go straight to the fuse. We went straight to the module, because usually I like to, Matt thinks the same way I do on that. He likes to go straight to the module and go, do we have power here or not? So we checked that pin 4, C155, no power. So he supplied power on pin 4, and the ABS module powers up, and we clear all the fault codes. Nothing comes back, no COM codes of any kind. ABS light goes out. We go, oh, so we got a power source problem. So we went under the dash, and we got super lucky, and it was, in fact, a blown fuse for the ABS module. So we replaced the fuse, cleared all the faults. Matt took it for a drive. No codes came back. So we had a situation that the symptom mimicked what the initial concern was from the customer, and it set a similar code, which was labeled throttle, but it was not, in fact, a throttle problem. But the customer's perception would have still been, hey, you replaced my throttle body, and it's doing the same thing it did before. Well, yes and no, right? The outcome symptom is maybe the same, but the root cause of the symptom is different. And I mean, this is one of the problems we run into with cars nowadays is you can be dead on your diagnosis, you can be completely correct, and you can still get yelled at by a customer, or you can still have a customer saying, you didn't fix my car. And it's interesting that we run into a situation like this where the actual symptom that's perceived by the customer is indistinguishable, despite the fact that it's coming from a different root cause. And I don't know. I don't know about you guys, but I thought that was really fascinating, just because it's kind of connecting the dots with what is the customer's experience versus our experience as technicians, and what do we see versus what they're seeing. And I mean, some of this also kind of hits on the phenomenon of how important it is that your front shop people are able to communicate effectively with your customers, right? Now, Matt's lucky. He has pretty good front shop people from what I gather, and they do a good job of communicating, and they document their findings, and they show their customers, hey, this is the pre-scan of the vehicle, and here's the information we got, and et cetera. But that's one of the things you run into sometimes when you work as a technician is some of the shops you work with, they may not have a service advisor or a service manager or an owner or whatever who communicates real effectively with the customer. So documenting those findings and explaining the connection of here's what the perceived fault or symptom is by the customer, here's the pre-scan and the faults we found, here's the fault that we determined to be the root cause of this specific fault code, and we believe also the symptom, but we are not 100% sure until you drive the vehicle a significant amount. So I think that's the pitfall we run into, is there are always those possibilities where we could have a duplicate like that, right? There is a duplicate fault, same fault, different root cause.
Yeah,
Matt, do you have anything you want to add to this one?
Well, I would just say that sometimes you got to be careful with the definitions in the scan tool, and just going off that definition. In this case, the definition was accurate to service information, but you had to really read the service information to understand that the forced stop really was just I don't know, overly complex way of basically saying it shut the throttle body off. Like, it's just not. It's going to be limp mode,
right?
And it's kind of like almost like a P0700 set in the PCM or ECM. You know, you got to go look at the TCM to find out why there's the PCM or ECM setting transmission codes. In this case, it was we're shutting off the electronic throttle body, going into limp. Now you got to go find out why. And it turns out ABS is involved in that.
Right, which makes sense for drive-by-wire cars. But it's just fascinating to me, too, because, you know, the other thing I noticed about this was when I was looking at all of the fault code definitions, Ford is pretty freaking vague. Like, the information I gave you guys and posted there, it's pretty vague. There's not a whole lot of depth giving a whole lot of, here's why this fault will trip or anything like that. So I think, you know, you run into those situations. I mean, shit, you work on Euro cars, you run into this every day where you get a very vague definition and there's like absolutely freaking nothing that tells you, hey, what the fault setting criteria is. You basically have to go from a fault definition, that's it, on a scan tool, no less. And then you got to go from there and try to extrapolate, okay, what is going on here? And we got to think about this conceptually and try to put the pieces together without having, you know, even the depth of information that Ford provided, which again wasn't great, but it was still better than you get from the Euro cars, unless of course you have the factory interface, right? So you got Otis and you slap it on the car to give you a test plan, and they probably give you a more in-depth definition of a fault, and you might actually have a prayer at being able to piece it together without having to think about things on a really smart scientist level, right? But I think you know, getting in the practice of that, just kind of, you know, putting that in your head every time you're working on cars, at least for me, it helps me process stuff in a different way. But I thought it was a really interesting case personally. So I thought it would be a cool one to share. And I was like, man, just totally got to share that. So we got time to share other stuff too. If you guys got anything that you want to do in terms of sharing additional stories or problem cars or whatnot, I'm just going to leave this up on the screen, which is the promo codes. So this is the promo codes from Kirian's provided one. So if you want to buy an N2 Neuron or any of their other accessories, you can use ARCS as a code for 20% off. Isaac has created a promo code, Shotgun 10, for 10% off any Topdon products. So that's pretty cool. So definitely, you know, jump on there if you're looking to get a Topdon tool, and he'll set you up good. And yeah, so I mean, do you guys got any problem cars you want to talk about right now? Anything interesting that you're dealing with? Maybe one you've resolved, but you still want to talk about because it's interesting or weird? Anything like that?
You want to talk about 1996 URS6 Audi?
Yeah, sure. Talk about it. Tell us about it.
Well, I don't have any screenshots or anything, but you know, it's crank no start. I've sent you pictures of scope captures and everything. It's got the crank sensor signal, which is the sync off cylinder 3, I believe. It's got the engine speed sensor, which is like a normal crank sensor waveform, and it's got cam sensor now. We have changed cam sensor. It's got all that. It's got all those signals. It's still not engaging fuel pump relay, which engages the injectors and the spark plugs. Anybody got any idea about this? I mean, we got Mitchell, and I've always been a big hater of Mitchell.
You and me both.
You know,
I call it shitchel.
I mean, I mean, it's Snap-on, and yeah, as you know, Euro guys, it's a chock, it's a wheel chock. So yeah, I've always preferred all data, and I've had Identifix as well. But I mean, we're at the point now where I'm like, I have no idea. This thing should crank and run. It cranks, but it doesn't run.
It never grounds the fuel pump relay, even though you've got crank signal input. And now this one, I remember it has a cam sensor, a crank sensor, and a TDC sensor. Is that right?
Yeah, the TDC sensor is measuring off number 3. But yeah, all that's correct. The only thing, remember, I said is I haven't had a chance to get back to it yet, and I probably won't, because after discussion the other night, you know, I'm gonna just turn around and say no. Is the waveform for the TDC sensor? It does look backwards. Remember?
Yeah. Yes. I remember. Yeah, the waveform looks upside down. It literally looks upside down.
Yeah. No,
And
Justin. It's a 20 valve.
It's a 5-cylinder, right?
Yes, 5.720 valve.
Yeah.
Justin
5-cylinder.
Morgan was just asking.
Oh yeah.
And yeah, just to talk to Justin Morgan, that BMW X3, remember, that kicked my butt the other month. You remember the hack, and I was talking to you about it. That was an absolute nightmare. I mean, I said, let's put plugs and coils in it because I had a misfire. You know, I diagnosed it, and I see some hashing and spark line and what have you, all the rest of it. And yeah, it got
Do you have the
taken away.
waveform? Do you have a picture of the waveform?
I've got nothing. I'm sitting in my wife's office on my wife's laptop, hence why I'm away.
I wonder if I've still got it. I might still have it on my phone. Let me look.
But I watched a Mario video that he'd said he'd seen Justin post something about this that hash on the spark line, and it was exactly the same as that. Justin did say, "What plugs have you got in there?" And they were aftermarket, you know. And yeah, apparently, boss ended up taking it to the dealership. Yeah, plugs and coils fixed it, and I was like, "Really?" So I spent 4 days freaking about with this stupid car because I've been given aftermarket parts.
Well, that is always the shitty part, right? Is when you get burned by something like that. You're like, no, that cannot be the case. And then, yeah, I hate to say it, but it happens all the time where I go to shops and they got the initial diagnosis correct, and the shop orders aftermarket parts, and it turns out, nope, still doing the same thing. And then I diagnose it and I go, yeah, it's that part. And they're like, but we just replaced it. I'm like, I don't care. It's that part.
I mean, I totally get it, you know. I mean, but why are we buying parts from, you know, wherever we're buying them from? You know what I mean? It's a bigger issue than we should be discussing here. You know what I mean? Right?
Okay, so I found the reference waveform. I'm going to email them to myself, and then I'll put them up on the screen just so people can see. Okay. Okay. Now, if my phone will let me attach it. Okay, that one.
Yes, Jason, it was actually. Apparently it was.
Oh, Morgan's got it. Ah, nice. Oh, look at that.
Yeah, that wasn't quite as severe as that, but it wasn't far off it. You know what I mean? Right? That was the BMW, yeah.
Were you using a picoscope?
Yeah.
Oh, damn it. I was going to make it.
Yeah, he actually is.
But it's not an automotive picoscope because I'm not rich like you boys. I'm a poor white
Have you
boy.
seen the power of the dollar lately? I don't want to hear that. We're in a recession, regardless of what the definition has changed to.
I use my little old 2204A 2-channel and it's perfect. It works great. You know what I mean?
Oh.
Well, look at that. He's got the waveform and everything. That
22
figures
horse.
that he has
Is that
captures,
still
and I
8-bit?
see that it's labeled Bosch plugs. Aftermarket Bosch plugs. I took a lot of calls on the aftermarket Bosch plugs.
Yeah, here's the thing, Matt. Yeah, the 22048. It's a great little scope. It's 2-channel scope. It's like $130 on Amazon. It's Pico. It uses Pico 6, or you can use Pico 7 with it. And you know, because where I'm at, they got no scope. They got nothing.
All right, let me see here. I'm gonna do. Okay, so I've got the waveforms here. So here's the reference waveform. So you can see this is the inductive sensor.
Right. Here's the thing. That is something I found Googling this Audi URS6 thing, and they've posted this. They do say that is from some 1990 Audi A90 or whatever, or Audi 90. I don't know whether that should be what we should be seeing. You know, that's all I can find.
I would think that that's the same. I mean, I'd love to see a reference waveform just to be from that exact vehicle, but oh boy, I would suspect that's it. But then here's the one that's his.
What is the
So you see,
TDC?
it's inverted.
pick up? What is it actually reading? What is the TDC sensor reading? A reluctor?
TDC.
No, but
Matt.
What kind of question is that?
The TDC sensor is reading a pin on a flywheel. There's a
cool.
Yeah.
a metal
Great.
pin pressed into the back of the flywheel that the TDC sensor picks up.
Perfect. Thank you.
That's correct, yeah. And it's on number 3, cylinder 3.
Neat.
Yeah, and then there's, Adrian had also examined the possibility of a cam sensor clearance issue because this has like an adjustable clearance on the cam sensor. But I didn't see anything in his waveform other than the fact that the bump was just inverted versus the known good. I thought that was odd. So, I mean, like, I guess I'd ask you guys, have you seen something like that on that style sensor, like a TDC sensor where it's just one bump like that? If it's inverted, do you think that would cause it to not start and not trigger the fuel pump relay? I've just never experienced it. What was that?
Just depin it and swap the wires.
I guess you could do that.
That was my next
I have
thing, was
seen-
to jump it around and swap it around. Yeah.
Craig?
Yeah. I have seen that, an aftermarket sensor wired backwards.
I was just wondering, it's the only thing of data that you've provided where I'm like, it's the only thing that doesn't match anything that you've given me. And I mean, I've looked at all the wiring and the service info and whatever, and I'm like, yeah, Chase said he was asking about a podcast episode talking about an inverted waveform. And yeah, I mean, that is the one thing where I'm going, man, I wish I could say that it was anything.
I remember back a while back, I had it was a Nissan, some minivan or whatever, I can't remember what it was. It had cam sensor issue, and I'm scoping it, and you can watch the cam sensor just die out while it goes hot. So I was like, okay, I'll go to the parts store, which was literally 500 yards down the street. So I used to walk down there, pick cam sensor up, put it in, start it back up, and I'm looking at it on the scope, and I'm like, that's inverted. And I was watching it, so I was like, okay, take it back. No, this ain't right. Yeah, it wasn't setting any codes or anything, but I'm just like, this is back when I had the shop. I was like, this just ain't right. So get another one, same thing. I'm like, nah, take it back. Give me another brand. What you got? They said, we got Standard Motor Products. I said,
oh
okay.
no.
No. And I'm gonna be honest. Yeah. Said Standard Motor Products, I'll try that. Put the Standard Motor Product one in, and perfect. Yeah.
I mean, some substandard, yeah, no shit. That's pretty funny. Oh man. I guess, yeah, I mean, for me, I'd be really, really, really tempted to throw an OE sensor in it for the TDC sensor.
I mean, I'm now at the point where, you know, if it doesn't come in an OE box, right, with a dealer receipt, I don't want to fit those brake pads anymore.
No, I mean, I get it. There's so many problems, you know, it's just,
there's
it's
so
frustrating.
much counterfeit crap going on now.
Well, that too, that's another problem. You know, we get a lot of calls on the Bosch line where guys would say, yeah, I got these whatever spark plugs for this BMW. And I'm like, yeah, where'd you buy them? eBay. I'm like, no, eBay is not an authorized distributor or seller of parts. Amazon is, eBay not. And
No, I'm not being funny, but I mean, I remember seeing someone a couple of years back, like Dusty had done someone with some Bosch parts he'd got from AutoZone and Bosch parts he'd got from WorldPack, and they were two different parts.
Well, yeah, but the one said Borscht.
You know, and it's getting to the point now. It's like, you know, I'm like, nah, you know, don't install non-dealer parts. But
well, I mean, hey Matt, you had how many blind spot sensors or parking aid sensors defective lately?
3.
Mind you, can you imagine? Can you imagine calling up? Can you imagine calling up, say, Audi North or South Orlando, and saying, "Hi, I've got a 1996 Audi S6. I need a cam sensor for it." You imagine what their answer is going to be.
You might be better off just finding one at a junkyard, honestly.
No, we managed to find some guy actually makes them. I don't know whether they're any good. Well, they read, so you know what I mean? They do some things that are half reasonable, like, you know what I mean? But yeah, I mean, you can't even buy. Audi don't even make motor mounts for like 2015s anymore.
No,
you know.
Yeah, I mean, we're seeing parts that are going obsolete way earlier than they used to, which is disturbing, right? Because I mean, literally, if there's no company out there that's going to answer the call and make something halfway worth of crap, it's like, uh-oh, we're in big trouble. Oh man,
it's ridiculous. It's. I mean, it's ridiculous, but it's fantastic in another light. Because, like we've discussed, you know, I thought about looking at getting in this module cloning.
Well, that's what I was going to say. That's the new avenue that guys are examining for that very reason, because the obsolescence of modules.
Yeah, I mean, you know, if you can't buy modules for 2022s, 2023s, you know, you can't buy modules for them. What hope is there of even any manufacturer trying to make a module for 2016 anymore?
Probably virtually zero.
Exactly. So, I mean, you know, if you can get off out of a junkyard, you can clone it, you know, it's all good, you know. But yeah, it becomes complicated when you can't read the data off the old module. But
EEPROM is really becoming a thing for sure. I think there's more and more that are guys. Oh yeah, Leo, a defective camera. Well, it's funny you say that, because my 2020 F-150 was setting faults for the forward-facing camera for the heater circuit, and I'm like, this is a 2020. So I thought, you know, it would set the faults all the time, and even in the summer. And I'm going, okay, this is kind of interesting that it's doing this. And so, you know, I scanned it, I cleared it, I scanned it, I cleared it. It came back repeatedly. So when I took it into the dealer to have some other warranty work done, I was like, hey man, I'm getting a heater circuit fault for the IPMA, which is the image processing module in the camera. And I said, it's getting a heater circuit fault, and it keeps coming back, and it keeps saying, you know, following radar, whatever the hell, I can't remember. Automatic distance regulation is not available. And they're like, okay, so it does put a fault on the dash. And I said, yeah, it will. It's not all the time, but the fault definitely trips in the control unit all the time. And they're like, all right. So they ended up replacing the windshield. The thing is a 2020, and they shouldn't have any problems with it. And I don't know how long it's had this fault, but I had scanned it one time and I noticed that distance regulation wasn't working. And I figured, it was in the winter when there was just snow and ice on the windshield, and nope, flat out defective windshield. Now I haven't rescanned it again to make sure that their diagnosis was correct, but just mind blowing to me that it's already broken and the thing's 20,000 miles on it, Yeah,
I
right.
mean, I'm doubtful because the windshield doesn't change generally, or it shouldn't, unless
Wouldn't
you've got
think
heating
so.
elements or something in it.
I've never looked at how the camera heating element works on those. What about on yours,
No,
Leo?
I'm talking about
Like, how do
heated
the
windshield. I can
Oh,
see
the
a
windshield. I gotcha.
heated windshield causing a change in the windshield.
Well, that was the thing, is I thought it was going to be. I figured it was going to be a defective camera, right? Because I thought the heating circuit was the camera had a problem, but no, they said the windshield was the problem.
The original windshield?
What was that? Yeah, original windshield.
Jeez, weird.
Well, and it's funny you say that too, because I took an ADAS call on the Top Don hotline the other day, and I had a glass shop, and they're like, "Yeah, we put this windshield in this. Oh, what the hell was the car now? I'm trying to remember. I think it was a Toyota." And they said, "Oh yeah, it's not calibrating. It keeps giving me an error. It shoots the first target because with the Toyota forward-facing camera, it goes, there's 3 targets it shoots in a sequence, or you can buy a composite that has 3 targets all on one piece." And they said it would shoot the first target and then it would error out. And I'm going, interesting. So I made, actually here, I think I have it on this computer. I will share it. Matt's already seen it because I shared it with him. Let's see if I can find it here. Okay.
All those module issues you're having, you just send them to Morgan. He's fixing them with like baling wire and vacuum tubes. Fix you right up.
That Audi, Matt, actually has a vacuum line going to the ECU.
Oh, for the map sensor?
No,
Or...
it measures intake vacuum at the ECU, and then it determines some other stuff off that. I can't remember exactly what it is, but there is a vacuum line going to the ECU.
That's pretty retro.
Old Chryslers used to do that. That vacuum line going into the holy.
And yes,
Volkswagen.
I measured vacuum just to make sure, and it's got that. I mean, I've done everything on this.
That's what you would call ultimate retro, man. That is ridiculous. Okay, let me see if I can get this to come up here. Okay. Where are you hiding?
This is already past my bedtime, but I had coffee late tonight, which is...
Uh-oh, so now you're never sleeping.
Yeah, so it's great for tonight, but I'm going to be groggy tomorrow.
Oh, I know the drill. That's I don't do caffeine, so I'm always suffering. Okay, so got it up. Let me pull it up on the screen here.
I'll save my coffee for the morning.
Yeah. So for you guys who do ADAS, you will
Leo
likely...
seems like a bulletproof coffee guy.
I love coffee. I just don't get to have the caffeinated version. It sucks.
Start pouring coffee then.
It's not. You're correct. It's really not. Okay. Where the hell is
coffee ice cream? Yeah.
Window. All right, let's see if there we go. Okay. So I made essentially like a massive checklist of stuff to do for ADAS calibration. So it's not necessarily 100% comprehensive, but I went through this entire thing with the shop on the phone. I'm like, all right, so did the vehicle get aligned before you did this? Yes. Did you guys modify? Is anything modified on the vehicle? Is the ride height acceptable? Any software been modified? Do you have a voltage maintainer on it? Did you pre-scan it? Are there any faults related? So I literally went through all of these steps and checked and asked him every single one of these questions. And he's like, insistent that they did every one of these things. And I said, look, just like an Identifix call, right? If everything you're telling me is true, and again, that's a big if, then it needs an OEM windshield. And he tells me, oh, it's already got an OEM windshield. And I'm like, you're joking, right? And he goes, no, it's a dealer windshield. And I'm like, thinking to myself, I don't know if I entirely believe that, right? the only reason it won't shoot these other two targets, it shoots one, but not the other two. I'm like, you're positive your setup's good. You're positive you took all the weight out of the vehicle, etc. Now, I did catch him lying on that one. I found out, he goes, oh yeah, it's he said, it's not he said, no, it's not the vehicle's not unloaded. And I said, oh, it's not unloaded. Well, you need to unload it because it needs to have no cargo in it of any kind. I'm talking like bare empty, except for the stuff that comes in it from the factory. And the fuel level needs to be correct as well. And I'm just like, come on, man. So he never called back. So either they put another windshield in it or unloading the vehicle fixed the issue and they got the calibration to go through. But it was an interesting call. So just another one of those fun calls to deal with, right?
I just must be missing out. I just don't have that much trouble.
No, you don't.
Unless
You do
something's
'em and-
jacked up, like from a
Right.
collision. But
Like the roof is messed up.
yeah, it's just, I don't know. Seems to be a lot of struggles out there, and I only do the stuff in blue, in his list there. That brown stuff, I don't know.
You skip the other stuff.
Yeah.
Those are optional, right?
I don't have all day. 20 minutes to get that bad boy out.
Well, especially if you do more and more of them, right? The more you do, the faster you got to move.
I'm just
Yeah,
gonna
Rich is
mark
laughing
up
at
the
that.
floor, and I'll just drive it on there.
Hey,
Close enough, right?
in case you guys were wondering, a Ford V10 6.8 liter will run on only the passenger side bank.
By itself, really? Five
The entire
cylinders?
the entire driver's side bank is not firing at all, and
I had a V8 do
still
that
running.
too.
It's still
That's
running.
funny, man.
It's hilarious you say that because today I had an 07 Tahoe. It's been to another shop where it got all kinds of new parts.
Of course.
Plugs, wires, or I'm sorry, no wires. Plug. Well, I guess technically coil near plug, coil, fuel injectors. It was only they were chasing a number 6 misfire because that's what flags. But it's an entire passenger bank wasn't firing, and it ran remarkably well. I drove it into the shop like, oh man, this thing runs like crap, but I wasn't
But it's
thinking
what it
like
runs.
I'm driving a 4-cylinder.
Yeah, no, this thing runs smooth. It starts up a little slow and then it idles up, but it surprisingly runs smooth. Like it's a Class A 35, 40-foot RV.
Oh, Lord.
The guy drove it 15 miles to the shop.
Yep.
Wow.
The same here. He drove it. Yeah.
And
Well, I know
Yeah.
Falco already knows what's wrong with it. Jeremy lives in Minnesota. He should know what's wrong with it. So 2007 Chevy Tahoe 5.3 liter VIN 0, and one bank is misfiring mainly because the and coils are not being. Well, let's just say they're not grounded. I mean, no point in jerking you guys around. But they're
Corrosion.
and I mean grounded like there's 4 wires to the coil, right? And so one of the main ground is not being grounded. And then on those,
Is that a Chevy? Because I saw something on Facebook. Someone posted about a big RV with a Ford. Look,
yeah, I
Same thing.
actually put that up on Cody's Auto MD.
Yeah, I was going to say, that sounded familiar. I was like,
Yep. I figured out that it's the PCM, the whole bank. It's not being controlled, but I was unsure if I was going to be able to put a PCM in it and get away with not programming it. But I happened to talk to Sean Tipping about it, and he said used module, as long as it's calibrated the same, will literally drop in.
Oh, yeah, because I remember seeing the post, and it was like, yeah, I remember you asking about the program, and people like FJDRS with a J-Box, blah, blah, blah. I was like, yeah, I remember seeing that.
Yeah.
you said it was, what was the drivers that failed in the PCM?
I believe it's the drivers, yeah, because it's all ground controlled, and I have no ground signal. I did some scanner danner stuff in there and figured it out.
Well, that's Ford. Ford they like to drop drivers. There's actually some guys who have been repairing the driver circuits on some of those PCMs internally, which Boy, oh boy, that takes some guts.
And Range Rovers and BMWs.
Oh yeah, I was gonna say, well, big surprise, right?
Well, we're having to
Should
follow
sell one
Cuba's playbook now with parts availability, so why not?
Yeah. Well, I mean, the
Yeah,
worst you can do is it still won't work, right?
I've replaced a few drivers on like 535s, 335Is. You know, I've placed a couple of drivers on there. You know, you can buy drivers, transistors, real cheap on Amazon. Right? But yeah, I had a Range Rover, I did an engine swap on it. Started right out, ran fine, then just went.
Falls flat
Still
on
the
its
one,
face.
still the one misfire. You know,
I'm hoping to
and,
have
like,
I'm hoping to have maybe a question for you guys. I don't know if it's going to make it to the next roundtable meeting, but one of my techs just put a head gasket in a Prius, and of course he's taken the defense that like, hey, this has got previously diagnosed already. I just put the head gasket in, but I was like, did you notice any noises before? And he said, when I was pulling it in, it sounded like an axle noise. And I was like, look, I'm not pointing fingers, but did it have any type of noise? And he said it made a noise. So long story boring is he gets it all done. Motor starts and runs fine, but it sounds like when it goes in between hybrid and gas mode, it sounds like all hell breaking loose inside the transmission.
Oh dear.
Yeah, well, they sound really bad. They sound really bad with a misfire.
Yes, they do.
No kidding. I've never
It'll
run
sound
across
like
that.
People have put motors
It'll
in them
sound like
things.
Run.
Sorry.
so did he just do a head gasket because someone else said it was a head gasket, or did he actually did the shop diag it at all in any way?
They have problems.
About a year ago, it came in. We stuck a borescope down. It was overheating. It had been running rough. One of my techs had recommended putting a set of plugs in it. We put plugs in it. At that time, we ended up putting a borescope down there, pressure tested it, and found coolant leaking into the cylinder.
Oh, gotcha.
So fast forward a year later, here we are. We finally got the opportunity to do the head gasket. We did new timing chain. I was present. He got all the timing marks on. Looks good. New plugs. But, you know, I didn't.
Was it carboned up?
Yes, but not terribly. I don't think it was terrible. But I think prior to us doing the spark plugs, I think something bounced around in that cylinder number 2, which I didn't notice until I got it back from the machine shop because obviously it had been cleaned up. But again, with the head off, everything kind of looked good. My machine shop's pretty thorough. He didn't notice anything. He put new stem seals in it, pressure checked it, all came back good. But yeah, like I said, it's kind of, when the engine's running, it seems to run smooth, but it seems to be when it goes in between the electric drive to gas mode, boy, it sounds like it can really come apart, and it goes away when I put it into neutral. So I don't know. I haven't really gotten to dive into it yet, but that's just what I got on my plate right now.
You should ask Isaac Rodell.
That's what I was going to say. Ask Isaac.
Okay.
He probably knows.
Yeah, I don't know him.
Oh, you
He
can
has
message
100
him.
Prius. It is 100 Prius that's at his house.
Yes, he does.
Okay.
Rob's correct. He has a lot.
I'm gonna be shameless. I do. You need to get some of Joe Cassie's little piezos, put them on. You can see exactly where the noise is coming from, and then pinpoint and diagnose it from there.
Oh yeah. The Delta sensor.
But the problem is the noise is probably coming from the clutch assembly or whatever, because they make a huge knocking noise when it misfires.
Oh,
yeah,
not necessarily Delta sensors, because Joe sells the little. It's effectively says knock sensor. You can zip tie it to the block or zip tie it to a transmission, zip tie it to anything,
Okay, yeah, Hawkins got one there.
You know
Yep,
what?
But his
Yeah.
noise,
And you can
his
stick your-
noise
you
is
can
probably
stick
going
a-
to come from the bell housing because of the way the engine's designed.
Yeah, that would
So
be
it's
my
going to
bet.
point him in the wrong. It's going to put him at the wrong direction.
That's true.
When those engines misfire, they knock really bad.
Interesting.
Yeah, I'll try and get a video of it. Maybe I can share it with Hawken or something.
Yeah, anything you get, I'd be interested for sure.
Yeah, right now we finished up the engine repair, but we still have the cluster torn out because that's getting sent out to get repaired. Because I don't know, I think we lost speedometer or gas gauge operation on or something. So that's getting sent out to get repaired. But when I get that back, I'll get that plugged in and see if we can, I don't know, get any codes out of it or not. But
hopefully it gives you clues, right?
yeah, I mean, we don't get too carried away into like hybrids and stuff, but trying not to turn any work away.
No. I mean, you want to do as much as you can. I get it, and I mean, lots and lots of shops are like that. So yeah, burn it down, and we're good.
There. Yeah,
burn it down. Goodbye.
Have you put a vacuum gauge on the motor?
Yeah. Okay.
Have you put one on?
I have not. No. Again, it's. I wish I had more info. My technician literally finished it this afternoon, and he's going away on vacation for a week and a half. So.
Oh, naturally, he's running away from the problem. Good game plan, man.
Oh, I would put a mechanical vacuum gauge on it and see
I
if
think
it
that's a
bounces.
good idea.
That's a good idea. Yeah.
The last two I had when I went into like VVT or whatever the mode is after it's running for a little bit, they started knocking. It was a mechanical issue. The vacuum gauge just started bouncing.
Okay.
Makes sense. Rich, that's hilarious. Oh my God. Oh man.
And unfortunately, it's totally my fault because I was talking in a class about how Priuses make horrific noises when they have a misfire, and this guy who owns a used car lot goes out and he unplugs a coil on a Prius on his lot, and he goes, "That sounds terrible." And he had the brilliant idea of going to the auction and unplugging the coils of the cars rolling through the auction block. And
oh my God.
I got this one dirt cheap. I plugged the coil back in and drive it home. I'm like, oh no.
That is terrible. I had one the other day that a dude told me he's like he would specifically go to the used car lots and he would erase all of the keys from the fucking car. So then they would be like, "Oh yeah, it doesn't have any keys that'll start the car. It won't start. I'll buy this car for $300 now." And I'm like, because he'd erase the keys so they wouldn't be authorized anymore, and they still have the keys. And the auction guys would come out and they'd be like, "Well, it won't fucking start. What the hell?" And they don't have scan tools and they don't check anything. So he'd literally be like, "Girl, I'll give you $300." And I'm like, "You are a sick bastard. That is fucked up." Oh my God. That is like switching the price on something at the store, man.
But it's profitable.
Yeah, it is. That's for sure.
At Mannheim in Orlando, they check your bag now when you're leaving because guys were pocketing keys left and right. There's 5,000 cars on the lot. The guy could leave with 50 keys, and
Oh my God.
Well, and a lot of the auctions now have their own locksmiths. They hire outside locksmiths to make keys for the converters.
That makes sense. Well, so Top Gun,
Richard, talking to Mannheim, Richard, when are you going to be back in Orlando doing some stuff?
I have a feeling. I have a feeling I'm going to find that out tomorrow or Friday. There's a meeting for all the CTI instructors, and I think we're looking to go back to live classes the fourth quarter of this year. I hope.
Cool.
We'll see.
Fingers crossed. I did get back doing something. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Sooner or later, I'll get back out there.
It's good stuff. Yeah, it'd be nice to have it more and not have to have it just be, hey, only in rare circumstances, right? Or only in certain organizations. It's disappointing. Well, it's funny because TopDon has some engineers that work out of the New Jersey office, and they actually have credentials for the auction, and they will go and basically test our tools on auction cars. They'll cut and program keys with our tools, and then they give the keys to the auction guys, and that's what they do. They let them do it. And they're like, "Oh, well, we get free keys out of the deal, so we don't give a shit." And I'm like, That's kind of clever on the auction's part, taking advantage of us beta testing, right?
I mean, that was
That's
the only.
no, that's actually kind of cool on Top Don's part because if it doesn't work, it's no problem. You know
Yeah.
what I mean?
I used to go to Mannheim early. Like my class started at 7. I'd get there at 3 in the afternoon. I'd have 5,000 cars with known good scan data. I would just bounce from car to car with a scan tool and collect everything I could.
Oh, that's nice. I'd like to do that.
It was fun. And of course, you know, if there's some cool cars there, I'd take them for test drives. Why not? You know.
Why not? Right?
Yeah. I mean, there's more than 5,000 cars at that auction.
Oh, yeah.
And yeah, there are some very cool cars there.
Big spoiling, right? So Chad said he's actually got a case he threw together that he wants to share now. So go ahead, fire away.
Okay, I'll have to figure out how to present my screen here.
Should be down at the bottom. You'll see a square box with an arrow, an upward arrow. At least if it appears the same way it does for me, anyway.
Thank you. Yep. Okay. Can you guys see?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. 2016 Toyota 4Runner. Okay, we'll see if I can actually scroll through here. So let me go back a slide. Chrysler dealership. Someone traded in this 2016 Toyota 4Runner, and someone purchased it. And on a test drive, they realized that the crawl control doesn't work. Now, this is a feature available on the TRD Pro and the TRD Trail, I believe. The lower models don't always have this. Sometimes they have the downhill assist. There's like a whole bunch of options that are kind of interchanged between the vehicles. So they said, can you look at this? Because they had no idea. I said, yeah, just drop it off. I'll look at it. They're like, well, the customer's test driving it. They'll just drive over there. So I jump in it, and I can't get it to activate. I'm like, okay, I'm going to need some more time to check some stuff. And I did do a pre-scan. The only code in there in the engine transmission was startability malfunction. Anti-lock brakes has that C120A, ECU initial settings incomplete. Now, if you look up service information, which I didn't grab a slide for that, it tells you to do a calibration with the scan tool for downhill assist control and the off-road mode and the crawl control knobs up on the top. So I run through the settings. It has you rotate the knobs. It learns the position of the knobs and the values of the knobs. And that all passes. That code clears. I have no codes. Crawl control still doesn't work. I said, I need some more time with this. The people bought the vehicle. They live 2 hours away. So they drove the vehicle home. They said, another day, we'll just make a trip down. We have some family. We'll come visit. So they come back down. I get to spend a little more time with it. And you can't see a lot of these inputs on scanner data. They just aren't there. I even got the subscription for the Toyota Tech Stream. But what I noticed when I scanned it with Toyota Tech Stream is there's a calibration update for the ECM. I went through the same calibration with the ABS for the crawl control knob. Nothing fixed it. So I'm looking at this calibration, and I hadn't done a calibration through Tech Stream in a really long time, so I had to kind of refresh myself. And I clicked on the calibration, and then you have to find the service bulletin, go through the calibration list, and search for that calibration. Now, I don't have a screenshot of the factory calibration list, but I do have a screenshot for the service bulletin that is listed for this calibration update. And I just want to make a note. Here's our calibration ID, that 335E3100. So if we look at the service bulletin, which it was for nothing related to crawl control, I just did, Control F, entered my calibration number to find my new calibration number. And if we look, we have a 335E3100. What I failed to notice quickly was that this is for a two-wheel drive vehicle. So the calibration is that the calibration that's in the ECM now that's loaded in is for a two-wheel drive 4Runner and a 2015 4Runner. So here's our information. We have a 2016 4Runner, and there's our production date. Late 2015 is when it was built.
So it should be a 16 then.
So it should be a 16, and it says right at the top of Tech Stream 2016 with the 1GRFE engine. We have the VIN number, which does match the vehicle. I checked that.
Good catch.
This is hours and hours into this vehicle.
Yeah,
Of course.
This was not a quick and easy one.
I'm so glad it's not just me.
Nope, it's definitely
No.
I
not
mean, it
just
didn't set a
you.
code for that.
It did not set a code, and I actually convinced the Toyota dealership to loan me a crawl control module. It's just the switch that goes in the overhead console, because I'm like, it's got to be the switch because it wouldn't work. And they said, yeah, we have one on the shelf that we ordered in for somebody and it didn't fix their problem, or one of the dealer techs. So it's
So it already got tried.
exactly. So we got the switch. I plugged that in, tried the calibration again. It still wouldn't work. And that's when I found that got the tech stream, found that the calibration was for a two-wheel drive. Now I did try to force a four-wheel drive calibration in there, and tech stream's like, no, you can't do that. So I pulled the ECM out, and we have this 89661-35M61. So I look on Repair Link just to see what my options are, and that ECM's not in there, but there are 4 ECM options for that year, which is an early build and a late build. And the split was, I believe, 8 of 2015. So before that and then after that, for the two-wheel drive and the rear-wheel drive. But we have I'm just looking at the last 3 digits of the part number, M62 for a rear-wheel drive early, M72 for a four-wheel drive early, and then an N51 and an N61 for the late models. Well, that doesn't match what we had here. We have an M61. That does not match any of those items. So I just Google searched it. Toyota Parts website came up, and they show that the M61 supersedes to the M62. So if we go back to our list, an M62 shows as a rear-wheel drive early version. So
it's still wrong.
it's still wrong. I just wanted to make sure. Now, when I pulled this ECM out to look at it, I didn't see any marks on any of the bolts holding this ECM in. It didn't look like the glove box had ever been removed. When I ran the VIN in our system, the previous owner of the vehicle was our customer, and he owned the vehicle for 4 years, I think. And we had done regular maintenance, and he had, the initial visit was like 24,000 miles. So unless the computer failed between 0 miles and 24,000 miles, this thing came from the factory with the wrong ECM.
That is insane.
And no codes at all, except for that initial calibration not complete, which could have been.
And no lights on either, right?
Correct. And if you push
the calibration printed on the ECU?
No, it was all the part number only on the ECU. Calibration is not on the ECU.
So the guy who had it ever since 24,000 miles just never noticed that it didn't have crawl control, or didn't care?
Correct. Crawl control is not used by most people. And this, I mean, it's a super mint 4Runner. The guy only took it down his dirt road, which is about a half mile long, to his house. Never went four-wheeling or anything. And even a lot of people that go four-wheeling don't use crawl control. And if you've ever engaged crawl control on one of these vehicles, you're like, why would anyone ever use that? Because it makes so much noise, and the ABS is activating, and it's surging.
I was going to say, isn't that where it kind of locks up a wheel and helps you turn on a tight turn?
No, the crawl control will keep the vehicle. It'll try to maintain a steady.
When you're going down the hill like this, right?
It'll
It's
do
like
it up or
on
down.
a Land Rover.
Yeah, it'll go
You
up
said
or
the
down.
magic word.
You can set the speed that you want to go to, and it'll try to maintain that speed even with wheel slip.
Oh.
So if you're going over rocks or sand, which is another knob to pick your terrain, it'll try to maintain that speed going uphill or downhill. So we obviously have the wrong computer. I get the right computer, which is an N61 instead of, let's go back. So this was a Mary 61. The correct one is a Nancy 61. So that's the only difference, one digit off. So I don't know if someone just grabbed the wrong computer and programmed
craziest
VIN into it. And I have a feeling that this is just how it was from the factory. So I didn't want to pay for another TechStream subscription, so I plugged in the Snap-on just to see. It gives me a code for VIN not programmed, and I didn't put the screenshots on here, but surprisingly, the Snap-on scanner had all the steps to set up the ECM and write the VIN. And
that's shocking.
And it was surprisingly easy. It only took a couple minutes.
It's not European.
Yeah, right. Figures.
And that's it. But I just wanted to share that because it's kind of a strange thing where, you know, there was no fault codes, there was no obvious faults. Electronically, the switch was working, the inputs were getting to the ECM. I believe there was a couple of data PIDs in the skid control module or the seat control module that showed that actual switch, and I didn't get screenshots of any of that because I was so frustrated at the time fighting this vehicle. And every time the guy came down to work on it, or when I was, you know, looking at it when he was test driving it, and when he came down the other visit, you know, he had a 2-hour drive to come visit. So it's like I'm trying to basically a waiter get this vehicle
right.
fixed.
Oh, jeez.
And I don't have a way of just sending him away so I can spend hours and hours on this thing. You know, he can only spend so long with his family before he he wants to go back home. But it was just kind of a strange thing. It was really frustrating. And, you know, if now that I know that, if I run into another weird thing like this again, where things just aren't making sense, then I may actually, you know, look into the calibration data sooner and verify that I have the correct calibration in that ECM.
But here's my, I mean, I get it, but here's my issue: is the car was working fine for how many years with that calibration in it?
6 years if it's a, you know, 2016.
With the same calibration in it, and all of a sudden, last week it decides it needs a new calibration.
Well, it was just that the original owner had never used
the crawl
that
control.
specific
Yeah, I never used the crawl
feature.
control.
And
yeah, he never exercised it, so he would never have known.
Okay,
Yeah.
so it's when you press the crawl control that's when the computer went.
Yeah, the computer just did not register it, and
yeah, it just ignored him.
And it was a manual shift transfer case, and the 4-wheel drive worked perfectly fine. Low range worked. The terrain knob worked perfect because that's all fed through the ABS module. It's just that the crawl control uses throttle control and brake control to accomplish that steady pace.
Yeah,
and
simultaneous modulation.
And everything else worked perfect except for that one option. And you know, the ECM is probably identical inside. There's probably no other hardware. So if I could have written the correct calibration to it, then it probably would have worked perfectly.
Man, it'd be interesting. You don't still have the ECM, do you?
I'm sure I do, because there's no core on it.
You should keep it. And the only reason I say that is if you don't have EEPROM tools, get in touch with someone on one of our groups that does have EEPROM tools, and you should send it to them and see if they can get the factory ECU, pull the calibration from the factory ECU, and then see if they can put it into that one. I wouldn't be shocked if they could, but I'd be really fascinated to hear if they could, because that would have been really interesting. But then you would have had to get out a Sharpie and cross off the calibration and the part number on the ECM, because otherwise the next guy would have maybe gone in there and gone, what the hell? It's got the wrong one in there. And in fact, you have corrected it and made it not the wrong one.
Well, Toyota computers rarely fail, so I'm sure that no one ever is going to touch that computer again.
I mean, in all honesty, who the hell wants crawl control?
I don't know, man. I've never done rock crawling, so I don't know what that's like.
Right, I've worked a lot of land drivers that have all the functions.
You know what probably happened? They probably went to the dealership and a tech just swapped in one to see if it fixed the issue. And it's the same problem, and he left it in there because everything worked.
But the VIN number was programmed in, and like I said,
you can change the VIN really easily.
There was no marks on any of the hardware holding in the glove box, holding in the ECM.
No evidence that it looked like anyone had been in there.
Yeah, either someone was very, very careful when they changed it out.
Hand tools.
There's definitely marks on all the hardware that I touch because I use power tools.
Yes, power tools. Please, power tools. Yes.
I cut out when you guys were presenting that, Chad. I'm sorry. I live in the boonies and I have satellite internet. Some of you guys are probably in the same boat, but I've got access to Toyota TIS. We've got a text program at my work. And if you could send me the VIN, I could probably go do a search. I don't know if you still have any of the hardware or documentation, but I can do a search and find out if there was anything documented on the Toyota side.
Oh,
if that'll help.
Yeah, Chad, if it happened that early, it'll show up as warranty and he'll be able to see it.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, I can check that.
Oh yeah, good point. Interesting.
That's cool.
If the tech admitted to it.
Yeah, right.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
There's probably a 2-wheel drive 4Runner running around out there with a 4-wheel drive ECM.
Well, like that Cadillac I got with the fuse box from a 2010 and a 15, and only the AC didn't work.
Literally only one thing. It's funny you say
Yeah,
that.
AC
Rob,
didn't
too.
work, and it worked before they took it to the dealership. They took it in to have the shifter cable replaced under
Oh,
warranty.
man.
Yeah, but Rob, you take on some special work.
Yeah, you do. You do some crazy cars, man. It's some of the stuff you see is just nuts. And I love the fact that you'll take on literally anything and you fix all of them. That is
No. I'm getting a message saying a wife's computer needs to restart in 4
Oh,
minutes.
yeah, no, not now, right? Well, it's funny though. So I had a.
I got that
vehicle that was-
Volkswagen coded.
Good.
Oh, you do. You did. You did.
I literally
what was
searched
it?
Rostech's website for 2007 Passat in quotes, and then half the part number, and then what is it, BMV or whatever, BLV, whatever the ECU code is, and then I looked at their log from the cars, and I found a wagon.
Oh, you found a log file. Oh, nice.
Well,
Dude,
everybody
that's
posts
awesome.
log files, so it searched the log file for me. But
That's a
now
good
I can't
idea.
code the parking brake. It's coded for the rest of the world. And when I try to code it, it says conditions are not met.
Interesting. Is the parking
And I don't
brake
know if it's
set
because
or
I
not
guess the
set?
brake pedal switch is messed up because the car starts when you put the fob in the dash.
Mm,
So I don't know if maybe that's stopping me.
that might be. I wouldn't underestimate that possibility.
It says clutch pedal, but it's automatic.
No.
So.
I know 7 will probably start without the brake pedal being pressed.
Yeah.
Oh, really? It sets a clutch pedal shorted code.
Is it a manual?
No, it's automatic. It's in the parking brake module. It's the only code I have.
Yeah, I think my GTI.
Because it has the automatic parking brake. Like it has the auto hold.
It does on 07?
Yeah. Yeah.
Craig says close the door. The driver's
really?
door. Yeah. Yeah. Volkswagens are stupid. There's all sorts of weird ass criteria like that it won't tell you. Wait a minute, you have a launch,
Was he
don't
spying
you?
on my was he spying on my security cameras?
No. He's just Craig has taken more phone calls than you can shake a stick at. he's run down a lot of roads that none of us have ever been down, believe me.
I'll try it tomorrow.
Yeah.
Well, I'm about to end.
Yeah, I was gonna.
2 minutes 54, and Visit Orlando says your computer needs to restart because I'm on the wife's. I'm on the wife's laptop because my laptop doesn't have a camera.
Oh yeah. Well, it is nice to have a camera. I bought one specifically for doing webinars and stuff. I have to train a bunch of Napa guys tomorrow on the Top Don product line in the morning, so I'll be sitting right in the same place I am.
My laptops don't have batteries. Right, I use desktops for everything because they're cheaper.
Yeah, I bet laptops are, they're hit or miss. Well, you're paying for the screen as with a laptop, you know.
Well,
I like
the trouble
desktops
is,
because you get to build what you want.
I need a laptop to run the NVH sensors on. You know,
Oh yeah. Have any of you
run
guys
the
tried
scope.
Pico on Mac yet?
No.
Dude, they have
I
it
didn't
for
even know they
Macintosh.
supported Mac.
Yeah, they have a download for Mac now. I haven't
Oh,
downloaded
No,
it.
because
Chad,
when men
Chad's going to try it right
don't
now.
use
Look at him.
Mac.
He's downloading it.
I have a Mac and a PC, so I bought a Mac Studio specifically for video editing because the Macs are like a shitload faster at editing video than the PCs. And I have a PC with like a pretty damn good graphics card and a ton of RAM and an i9 processor, and my Mac still edits video and renders it faster than the PC does. And I'm
but
like,
it can't do anything else, can it?
no, not really. No, it doesn't really do much else particularly well. But anything audio visual, it does infinitely better than a PC, and that's
PC
why I bought
runs
it.
Ista, Otis, VCDS. It'll also run Zentree. It'll run.
Yeah,
it'll run
everything else on PC. I'm just curious to try Pico on the Mac to see if it like actually runs better or the same, or because I mean, you know, some of it is the newest Pico 7 is a really major resource hog, and it seems to just slow down and trip out a lot when I'm using it. So I'm kind of curious to try it on the Mac to see if it runs smoother and less jerky. Just out of
I wish they'd
curiosity.
fix the USB 3.0 ports.
Oh yeah,
Because every time I
please.
use it on 3.0, it's like hit and miss.
Yeah, no,
Yeah,
it
but did
absolutely
they add a
is.
right click button yet?
Yeah,
not.
that's what I was
I
gonna
don't
ask.
think so. They should. Yeah. So if you guys do get suggestions or you get thoughts, message Ben Martins. He's on Facebook and he's also on LinkedIn. But send him anything you guys have for suggestions. He's pretty responsive to input and whatever. And I think he has the right connections at Pico to try and make things happen. And hey, any more they can do and listen to us and make it better, the better, right?
Yeah, I want to be able to hook up 2 of my 4423s.
See you later, bud.
Scam him and blame it on me.
Yeah, right. Yeah, no, I've been real pissed off about 7. 7 eats my battery on my Microsoft Surface really fast. Now, maybe that's because it powers all the probes, and maybe that's what's sucking my battery down so fast. But
it definitely is.
Yeah, it's got to be that because man,
Pico
the battery
by itself drains your battery a lot because I run dual batteries on my laptop.
Ah, gotcha. Yeah, that's got to be it. So I use the Topdon Hurricano H200, and I plug my Surface into that, and I essentially have to have like a mobile diagnostic cart with my Milwaukee boxes in order to not have my Microsoft Surface go dead. And I mean, like,
so why can't I run my refrigerator off my Topdon?
It says it'll run a small refrigerator.
It's a 70-watt refrigerator. It's 70 watt, and it won't turn on. No, it just keeps turning on and off, on and off, on and off, and it drives me insane. But I can run it off a jump pack, off a 10 amp jump pack.
Probably because it interrupts for the compressor.
Yeah, I thought about
it
that,
could
but
be
it's
the initial
250.
Yeah, that's true. It could be the surge wattage is too high. That could be it. That makes sense. Good point. Well, I have to experiment with it and try it out. But yeah, I use mine all the time for the Surface because otherwise the battery just nosedive, gone, dead. Well,
So
cool.
Do they make a battery pack that goes in line of a USB cord that can power the USB device while sending the data transmission as a pass through?
Yeah, they sell USB Y cables for that.
Nice.
So like if you use like a portable hard drive, you can power it up.
Okay.
Nice.
So I wonder if that would prove if that's what's killing your battery. If it's the software rendering or if it's the powering of the probes.
I should do that. Yeah, I should buy that and try that. I'm really curious because I'm sure that might be an experiment Pico hasn't run yet, and maybe they don't know the answer. Because I mean that any way to figure that out better would. I know the Pico the 4425A box has a power plug on the back also that you can plug into the wall or a power source. So I've been thinking about just grabbing a power source, plugging into that, and then seeing if the consumption on the Surface goes way down. Because I really got to do that because at this point it's just so frustrating because my battery just goes into the toilet so fast. And I mean, sometimes I'm at a shop sometimes I'm out doing diagnostics for 8 hours and I might use the Pico for 6 of those hours. And like, I don't turn it off and I don't take it off the car. And, I get weird cars sometimes that I spend a lot of time on. And when I do, holy cow, does the battery die fast. And yeah, it's nice to have 2 scopes for that reason alone.
Yeah, buy a USB Y cable for a hard drive, and then
I definitely will.
And just plug it into something else.
Yeah, I'll do that. I'll see what happens.
Did you guys hear Sean's latest podcast with the auto start stop?
Oh issue? Yeah, yep, really interesting case.
Yeah, so I was texting him because I'm like, I want a part 2. I don't want it to come back on him, but
no,
I want to.
But you want to know what happened, right?
Well, yeah, I'm glad that he got the car fixed, but I want to know why it wouldn't start after an auto stop function. But if he started with the key, it was fine. How does that oil control valve have anything to do with that?
Yeah, I was trying to think about that, and actually, I really had wanted to bring that up with Matt on here because Matt's like the kind of guy who probably thought about this for like 4 hours and figured out the logic in it. Because I know he talked to Sean on the car too, so I'd be really curious to hear what he has to say on that. I tried to think about it and figure out what made sense, and I haven't really had the adequate time to like examine it. But I'd be really curious to see what the cause was. Yeah, it's a GM product, Mike. It's a 1.5 Malibu turbo.
Yeah, right? It was. I think it was a Malibu, and it was like what do you say, a 14 or a 16 or
I
something?
think it was a 15.
14. 14 Chevy Malibu.
14?
According
Okay.
to
Yeah, so
yeah.
so it's kind of old. So early auto start stop, at least for GM.
Well, what I've really been tempted to do is go find one of those cars myself at a used car lot and say I'm going to take it for a test drive. I actually, so I have there's a car that I helped another guy fix on 16 Jetta 1.4, and it was an interesting one. It ended up being a wastegate was not adjusted properly, and who knows how it got out of adjustment. But it's an electrically controlled wastegate, and not the normal where it's a pneumatic electric hybrid style with an N75. Like most Volkswagens, it's a purely electric actuated wastegate. And he had this really interesting fault, and I can't remember what it was, but they put in a boost pressure sensor, and it was like a boost pressure sensor fault. And I had suggested, go check the base adjustment, because he goes, it drives like it has plenty of boost. It doesn't feel like anything's off. And I said, well, yeah, but at idle, the base adjustment of the linkage could be off, and that's probably what it is in my theory. And it turned out to be that, but I wanted to go get some logic, some baseline data so I could write it up as a good case study and whatever and use it in a class. So I found a used one at a dealer that's just a private independent dealer, and I was like, I'll just show up with my scan tool and pretend like I'm going to buy it, and then I'll mine the data off it, and we'll be good to go. So probably going to do that, but I'm really tempted to do like what Thornton does, where I just go find cars and like ask to borrow them, and then spend a bunch of time finding out what the difference is. So I have an F-150 that has auto start stop also, and I'd be really curious to scope cam and crank sensors and see what exactly is happening on the auto start stop versus a key ignition event, and just out of curiosity, because I asked Sean actually if they had covered anything about the auto start stop phenomenon he's seeing, like if Thornton got into anything related to timing, because I missed that class. And I thought he said that no, there was nothing covered related to timing. So I'm real curious to hear what, if he does get it back, what the hell it is. And if he doesn't get it back, I told him, dude, if you get cars like that, I build classes now, and I have to teach classes for Top Don. So if you get a funky, weird car and the shop's willing to let someone come fuck around with it, call me. I'll go spend 3 hours at the car and figure it out. Like mine the data and do all the stuff, because I'm getting paid to build classes, and that makes an unbelievable case study for a class.
Yeah.
So, let me go do it. If you don't have the time to dig in further, call me. I'll go do it. I'm more than happy to do that, and I don't live far from him. So,
yeah, I wonder if he had got to keep that old oil control valve, that he could install it in some rental car.
yeah, right. Let's just screw around with it. See if we can make that symptom come back. Boy,
Yeah.
I'd be really interested to see that for sure. Man, oh man.
Hey guys.
And it was temperature related
Chad
too.
Really?
From Dubai.
So Mike says he had one that did something similar to that. And it's funny you say that, Mike, because he actually did the update to the ECM and it didn't fix it. That's the crazy shit. Chad, you had something?
Chad, this is Chad from Dubai. Hi.
Hi.
Regarding this, your question on the auto start stop system, and we get, I have a shop here that we do a lot of work on the German cars, and I believe, as far as I know, every single car that we work on has the auto start stop system, and not that I'm very familiar with all of its functions, but I think I have a little theory on this. Uh, the oil control valve fault. Was there a fault recorded in the engine computer for the oil control valve?
No fault at all. So
No
what it
code.
was is basically they had a symptom. You would start it with the key and it would run and drive normal. When it would do an auto start stop event, it would slow start, like it would sputter and not start immediately. And sometimes it would run rough initially on startup after the auto start stop event. And it would also do it if you did an auto start stop event initiated by the scan tool. But again, if you turn the engine off and then started it again with the key, it would not do it, literally like right afterwards. So it was really odd because it was key start, no problems. Auto start stop, problems.
Would you think
so
that like they would hold like?
Just to let you guys in on something, I've come across situations like this very often, and usually I've even seen cases where absolutely no fault codes, but the auto start stop system would just not function. Started with the key, no problem. And I believe this is something to do with the logic programmed into the engine computer, wherein now this is what I'm guessing over here is that somehow the engine computer understands that there is a problem in the engine itself for whatever reasons, some kind of data stream that it's not receiving or something like that. And in cases like that, the logic program in the engine computer understands that there is a malfunction and it automatically switches off the auto start stop system because just as a prevention or as a safety to prevent engine damage. And I've seen this very often. No actual fault codes, but we've come across some kind of data streams where we've seen little odd readings on some sensors or something like that, and it would just do this, correct that problem, and everything starts working back to normal. And
Yeah,
this
the
is
only
just
thing he
logic
had in
based.
live data was cam timing desired versus actual would appear incorrect on an auto start stop event, but not on an initial key start event. So if he started with the key, cam timing desired and actual followed like it should. If it auto start stop event, then it would not. It would lag and it would be off by, I want to say he said 25 degrees or something pretty astronomical.
I think it was 40
And he
something.
also, yeah, it might have, maybe it was 40 something, but it
Yeah.
was a lot. Let's put it that way. And then he would
But only
turn
on
it
the
on with the
exhaust.
key again, and it would not do it with the key, but it would only do it with the auto start stop. That's the
So-
part that doesn't make sense.
Yeah,
The-
so that's
the-
precisely
the-
what I'm saying. Under the auto start stop conditions, we don't know the logic programmed into the engine computer. There's definitely something over there that's programmed into the engine computer that has different kind of whatever logic that's there that tells the computer, look, on the auto start stop systems, I'm getting this kind of data stream coming through from here, and it's off, and that's the reason why it doesn't work. But that I believe is just logic that's programmed into the engine computer, and it's almost impossible to figure out because each manufacturer will have different stuff programmed into their ECMs, and unless you're continuously playing with that particular manufacturer, it's almost impossible to tell what could be the problem over there.
Yeah, you
And
almost
I've
need a
seen this
known
run
good
across the
vehicle
board.
to spend time with to really figure it out. Which is, like I
It's
said, I'd love to do
impossible,
that.
Yeah, because
It's
don't they
impossible
use
because
top dead center?
Yeah.
Like they know what cylinder's ready to fire at top dead center, so it starts sooner, faster, easier type of thing.
Yeah, I do believe so.
Would you think they'd build into that somehow that they would like retard timing or
That was the question
something?
I had. Is there a deliberate retardation of timing or advancing of timing that happens on an auto start stop event that does not happen on a normal starting event? And so funny thing, so I have to do some testing on the Top Gun J2534 box drivers, and I have a 2024 that has auto start stop. So I'm going to download FDRS, and I'm going to look at my truck and see if I can see any of the timing related stuff and see if I can measure or notice any difference in behavior between the two normal key start events and then the auto start stop event. So, I mean, obviously it's a different manufacturer, so we don't know if it works the same, but it's a starting place to at least find out, hey, does it do it too? And if it
also
does, right, exactly. So it's just an opportunity to see it. I do know a shop that has a customer that has, I want to say, a 2015 with that exact technology as the Malibu that Sean had, and it's a maybe, I can't remember if it's a Malibu or an Impala, but it's a 1.5 auto start stop turbo. And I bet I could ask the shop if they could call their customer, and I'll be like, tell the customer you have something for him. Tell them I'll give them an extra key for free or something. I'll bribe them. But bring the car in and let me have like 4 hours with the car to screw around. And I bet I could find out then. So I'll ask around.
I have a customer with a new, like a 20.
Oh, sure.
But you know, that one being a 15, I feel like it's a early model or something.
Well, and that's the thing is, the strategy may have changed between the early initial release and the newer one. So I would agree. You'd want to try to find one of the similar era if you're going to try to mine the information off it, just because, well, we know there could be a difference, right? It's not guaranteed, but I mean, I always try to find something that's in the wheelhouse for,
Apples
age
to
of the
apples.
vehicle. Yeah, apples to apples, exactly. In an ideal world, at least, right?
Yeah.
I was
Well, cool.
surprised his podcast went as long as it did because I thought he was going to put that PCM update in it, and I thought
Yeah,
the
right.
episode was going to be
I was
over.
biting and I was like, it's over, and then it was like, wait a minute, no.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
okay. So Craig
fair.
said he thinks he remembers from the John Thornton class that there is different criteria for stop start versus normal start, which would make sense to me. I mean, it sounds logical. I guess I should just get off my ass and go buy the Thornton class and watch it because it's on the website. So stop making excuses. Just go watch it, right? Well, cool. I definitely appreciate everybody coming tonight. We're gonna do this twice a month is the goal. I may do a European session or Australia session, which will probably be at crazy hours that you guys aren't available, so don't worry about that. But I'm gonna probably
in
do
Dubai right now. What is it?
Yeah, I was gonna say there's
70?
one guy in Dubai, so good. But we'll probably be doing one at a time that's more convenient for him in the future. Rob,
that would be nice. That would be nice because right now it's 7:20 a.m. in the morning, and
yeah, it's a little hard.
It started about 4 o'clock around here, and I just kind of opened my eyes and I realized, okay, I got a message coming in, so I immediately got on. But I didn't want to put the video on because to see me when I wake up is one horrible thing, and we're all shut the class off.
Fair enough. Well, yeah, I'm working with
No, but
what's
it's
his
great.
last name?
It's just great to talk to guys that are in the same industry, and it's the first time I'm doing this, so it's fun. I mean, it's really nice to have you all on, exchange views and stuff, and it's fantastic. Good going, guys.
Absolutely. Yeah, I really, I'm grateful so many people have been able to come. We had like over 50 people the first time, and I think we had probably somewhere in that neighborhood this time. So I'm really glad so many people came, and I am going to try to do like either an EU or an Australia or maybe one of each session. And those will be brutal times for me, but I'm going to try to get those going so that we can get some more people from not in the US or North America area so that they can also share their perspectives. I'll probably be pretty useless since they'll be talking about cars I never see, but it'll be an interesting experience and get more participation as well. So yeah, Rob Dodder, you said you wanted to share something? He's got to unmute.
Remember earlier how you were talking about stuff you couldn't reset with a battery reset?
Oh, yeah.
Did you know if you put a Nissan into airbag diagnostic mode, it will not reset no matter how long you have the battery disconnected?
I assume you learned that the hard way.
Yeah, I released a video on a 19. And they have a procedure where you cycle the key to get flash codes because not all the codes are on scan data.
Oh my God! On a 19?
They never tell you the procedure to get it out of that. I kept having this flash code and it wouldn't match to a chart. I looked on IATN and there was a post from like an 07 Infinity where the guy's like, "Oh yeah, there's a TSB on this." I looked, there's a TSB on it. It's only to get it out of diagnostic mode, and they never added it to the repair information. And you got to turn the key on for like 8 seconds, time it, turn it off for like 4, turn it back on for 8, and you got to do it like 5 or 6 times. It took me 30 minutes to get it out of diagnostic mode because you actually have to time it. You have like a 1 second window.
I would have jumped
Holy
off.
cow. Dude, that literally sounds like
3 weeks trying to figure out what the code was. Because I
That's
didn't
like
look at
their idle
TSBs because
volume.
my issue wasn't with the TSB related fault in the beginning.
Oh my God! It's like an idle air volume relearn on a Nissan. You know how a lot of those you have to literally do the manual way, and it's a huge pain in the ass. And everyone's always like, "I can't get it to relearn," and I'm like, "Yeah, I know, because it's a super anal, irritating process to get them to relearn." Oh,
You know
man,
what I found?
hate
I don't know if this works for them all, but the last couple I had to deal with a high idle after somebody changed stuff is on the scan data. In the scan tool, it has an option that says fix or like that, and you press it, and it instantly goes to idle normal.
If it fix, what was it? What was it labeled?
It says fix RPM or something like that.
Interesting. I'll have to watch for that the next time I'm on a Nissan.
And it just instantly idles down.
Nice. Well, that's good. God, I hope
Problem
someone
solved.
created. Yeah, I hope someone created a bypass for that because holy cow, what a nightmare those cars were for a long time.
I had the very same issue on resetting an oil service for some of these Jaguars, and it's got a 3-second window. in which you have to manually reset the oil service. Oh man, I spent probably an hour trying to reset the damn thing, and I just couldn't figure out what the hell was going wrong. And eventually, maybe 2 or 3 hours, I don't really know, because we finally managed to do it, and you had an exact 3-second window to do it. Press this button,
No leeway.
press that button, do this, and switch the ignition on and off, and things like that. Man, they're getting just so stupid with this stuff. I just can't understand. And you can't set it by the scan tool. You can't reset that by the scan tool. You have to do
I
it
know.
manually.
Yeah, I actually, it's funny you say that. I had a Jaguar that was like that too. It was a Range Rover. Yeah, I had I want to say it was like a 15 or a 16 Range Rover, and it was the same thing. Could not get the oil service thing to reset, and it was just a nightmare. And it was literally, you had to do a perfect sequence. There was no scan tool functions. Oh man, I do not miss that vehicle. That was a huge pain. Holy cow. Well, I'm pretty gassed, so I appreciate everybody coming. Thanks everybody for presenting who did. It was awesome. You guys all shared cool stuff. Hopefully the stuff I shared wasn't too boring. If I get anything more interesting for next time, I'll definitely share that. And if anyone else who didn't present this time, you get any interesting cars you want to share, even if it's not overly fancy or puzzling or whatever, share what you got. It's always interesting, and we all learn something from each other in just the way that we look at problems and how we describe them and walk through them. One of the guys who presented last time, Ben Varnado, he presented, and it was the first time he ever wrote up a case study. And he said to me during the process of writing it up, he learned a lot just about how he thinks about the process, how he processes the problem, how he describes it, how he shares it, all that stuff. So he said it was just helpful just to go through doing it, if for no other reason, because he learned things about himself and about his process. So just cool side notes there. But make sure to send me your emails for the drawing on the N2 Neuron, and we'll keep your eyes peeled. I'll post for the next month. I'll definitely post and let you know about the next meetings, and I will post the EU and the Australia ones when I get those sorted out, also for anyone who's not in North America. So cool. Thanks for coming, guys.
Thanks, Hakan. I appreciate you putting these on.
You bet. We'll see you guys later.
Yes.